all?
Zero. In fact, all the science we have would lead us to the opposite. The science we have would definitely suggest that Noah wasn't real. And like just simple logic would tell you that the Noah story is not real as well, right? So like, how did the penguins climb up and down or climb down the mountain?
I mean, I've been struggling with this, but that means did he grab every single animal, like including insects like honeybees and termites? I mean, I do struggle with it.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is like the Noah story doesn't make a whole lot of sense because, for example, even if you agree that they only took certain kinds of animals, that they didn't take like every species, you still have like 67,000 kinds of animals on the boat. And 8 people couldn't care for that many animals every day over the course of an entire year. They were on the boat for like 371 days. And the animals have to eat something for that time period. And they have very specific diets. Like pandas have to eat a particular diet. The meat eaters have to have meat, right? They can't consume grain. So like there's just all these like really improbable things with the Noah story that would lead one to believe that it's fairy tale.
All right, thank you. I thought I would try to prove you wrong, but I guess I have something to think about. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for coming up, man. It is interesting. If you grow up in a religious background, you might be inclined to just assume that the Noah story is true, but obviously that doesn't really hold up to rigor. It's not Wednesday, Whiskey Punch. I was trying to test out the YouTube live stream because I just finally got access to going live on YouTube because I've been on there for 60 days. Not YouTube, I'm sorry, on Facebook. Although it's given me a little bit of trouble. Like it looks like I have to schedule a stream ahead of time in order to go live on Facebook. I don't fully understand what's happening there, but either way, we'll attempt it. We'll attempt it. I'm trying to get Facebook configured as we're bringing guests in. So anyways, the guests have a little bit of trouble connecting. So we're just waiting on the next guest because the guest queue is empty and I'm still in TikTok jail. But the guest queue, the live just opened. So the guest queue will populate here in a minute, I'm sure. So, Star Wars, you are not an op. The guest just, he or she, I don't know. The name was Hay. So it's possible that, they just accidentally got into the guest box. So can someone explain why there are 4,000 religions? Here's the thing, right? We've got all these religions. And it would seem to me that if God was evident, right, God was obvious, then we would be able to ascertain his or her or its existence. How are you doing, Xavier?
Good.
Xavier, are you at least 18?
Yeah, I'm 23.
Awesome. And are you a believer?
Yep.
Awesome. Which God do you believe in?
The God of Israel.
Okay, so, are you a Christian?
Yep.
Fantastic. What would be your most compelling evidence or argument for the Christian God?
Well, I just wanted to talk about the point that you mentioned earlier, that there's like so many gods. But the fact is that there's like I think like 2/3 of the world population believe in the same God, Yahweh. Muslims and Christians and Jewish people. Like I know you said that there's like thousands of gods, but there's only like 5% of the population that believes in all these other gods. But most like religions believe in the same God, Yahweh.
They don't. So as it turns out, Yahweh is not the God of the Muslim faith. They kind of pretend like they're the same God, but they're really not. Like what the Muslims say about that God and what the Bible says about that God are completely different, right? So they're basically the same God, like not even in name only, but maybe, in vagueness of character.
Wait, can I ask you something?
But even if the Muslims did say that, hey, we actually do believe in the same God of Judaism, it doesn't mean that the God is real because lot of people believing something doesn't validate that the something is true. Once upon a time, everyone thought that the Earth was flat. That didn't mean that the Earth was flat. Also,
Wait.
1 second. Thank you for the $5 super chat. The Ungoogleable man. Ungoogleable says, I just saw you on the line a week or two ago and binging your content since. You're a master at this. Love it. Keep up the good work. Thank you so much for the super chat, and I will keep it up. So what's your response there, Xavier?
Can I have whatever you're smoking? Can you tell me who your dealer is, please? Can you DM me his number? Because I really, really, really want whatever you're smoking. It has to be some crack out of this motherfucking universe. Please, I'm begging you. I'll give you like $100 if you could just tell me who's giving you this crazy ass weed. That's insane.
So,
I'm
what's
begging
insane?
you. I'm begging you. Please give me whatever you're smoking.
So I'm insane because I don't believe your fairy tale. Andy's gone. Well, I don't know if he thought he just made Jesus proud right now. I'm not really sure what he thought he was doing, but that didn't really. I don't know if that went the way he planned or not. Yes, Michael, I am going live tomorrow. So, yeah, sorry for the confusion. I'm trying to test out the Facebook live streaming software tonight. So it's going to be a short stream. I'm not going to be here till midnight. But I'm attempting to figure out how to live stream from Streamlabs over to Facebook. It's not working very well. Facebook denied my connection already, so I don't know what's going on there. But you're right. Yeah, he was clearly the one that was, on the wacky tobacco. Yeah, he ran pretty quick too. Anyways, we'll see. We're going to have some fun tonight anyways, even if Facebook doesn't want to cooperate. We'll see what we can do. Yeah, you're right. It's Zuckerberg's fault. How do you have a platform with this much money and you can't just click go and start a live stream? It's crazy. Hand of the day, are you with us? Because you're in the box, but you teacupped right away. Hello? Hola? Anything? ¿Cómo está? Did you request by accident? I'll drop you down. Don't worry. Okay, well, we got someone waiting over on YouTube. We'll bring the YouTube guest in. We should have Joshua in. How you doing, Josh? Can you hear everything?
Yeah, I'm all good. How you going, mate?
Oh, hold on a second. For some reason, Josh, when you talked, it came out of my desktop speakers rather than my headphones, and I'm not really sure why it did that. That's a weird thing.
Yeah, I heard the feedback as well.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Let me figure out what the hell's going on with that.
Yeah, nice.
So let me just unplug the damn speakers. Hold on. All right, what about now? Let me see if it defaults to the headphones. Well, shit, now I can't hear you at all. What the fuck's going on here? I just used this software like a day or two ago, and it worked fine. So I'm not really sure why the audio is screwing up. Did everyone on TikTok hear it? Or, yeah, you didn't hear it either? You can't hear them? Hold on, let me see what's going on with this nonsense. It's odd. It's odd. What the fuck's going on with this thing? All the audio is set to go to my headphones. I don't know why it would do anything. All the audio output is set to my headphones, so everything should be coming right back to me. That is odd. That is odd. Give me one more second to check something. All right, try it now. Josh, can you say something for us?
Test 1 2 3.
No, I didn't hear a
me?
damn thing. Okay.
Nah.
Well, son of a bitch. Maybe I'll have to restart the software, guys. I don't know what's going on with the software. I'm not really sure why the YouTube guest is not being heard. Something's going on with the... oh, you don't see anyone in the box? Well, yeah, their video is probably turned off as well. Let me see if they're still here. Yeah, I mean, they're... it looks like they left and came back. All right, what about now, Josh?
Can you hear me? Is that any better?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Can everyone else hear him? Yeah, everyone can hear you. All right, I think we're good now.
Okay, cool.
I don't know what.
What was it? Was it because my video was off?
I have no idea. I don't know what happened.
Oh well.
I have no idea, but it's working now. So let's do what we can, right?
Let's go.
All right. So is your name Josh?
It is Josh. Yep.
Awesome. And Josh, are you at least 18?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. And what God do you believe in?
So I believe in the Trinity, the Christian God.
Right. Yeah, the 3 in 1. Okay. Cool.
Yep.
What would be the best evidence or the best argument for this God's existence?
For me, I think morality is the strongest argument.
Oh boy. Okay.
Okay. Let's see.
Can you lay down your premises and we'll see how far we get?
Well, it's just the whole subjective morality. I find it hard for atheists to have a kind of foundation of morality. Not saying that atheists don't know morality. This is the typical kind of spiel that you guys always have, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, we've had this debate hundreds of times. Yeah,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you don't like subjective morality?
Well, so the thing for me is when I hear these deconstructive kind of videos, everyone's kind of picking at God's morality, saying, "Oh, the Old Testament this, Old Testament that." Mm-hmm. So I find it hard to take your arguments.
You haven't heard my arguments.
Or just not you specifically, but general Christian deconstructive videos.
Yeah, I mean, while you're having a conversation with me, I'm going to need you to address my arguments, not arguments you've heard other people
make. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay. So your argument is that you don't believe in subjective morals?
That's true, yeah.
Okay, so what would be the evidence that morals are objective? Because by default, they are subjective.
Yeah, so you're saying that you can have subjective morality, right?
No.
So that is the thing. Everyone can have their own subjective morality.
Yeah, I'm saying by default, the morals are subjective. What would be the evidence that they're objective?
So you're saying outside of God, right? What would be the evidence that they are objective?
Right, because if your evidence that God exists is objective morals, then you have to substantiate that objective morals exist, or else you have a circular argument. Then you'd be saying, well, objective morals exist because of God, and God exists because of objective morals. Neither one of them actually have any proof for them.
Okay.
Right.
I think, yeah. I mean, so this is my first time actually coming up to having a talk with someone, so I'm just kind of giving it a shot. So
no, that's fine. Listen, we're all here to learn.
Yeah. So can you give me your argument of what subjective morality is? Because obviously I only hear what the Christian kind of side of it is. So I'm kind of keen to hear what the atheist or agnostic side is.
Yeah, so I mean, from my point of view, all morals are subjective, and this is just the default position because no one has ever made a moral judgment without using their mind. And by default, something that is determined by the mind is by definition subjective, right? So if there are objective morals, we would have to know how we could ascertain what they are, right? And so that's a big problem because Christians think that they have the objective morals. The Muslims think that they have the objective morals, and then down the line, right? So in order to demonstrate that objective morals exist, you would have to first demonstrate that your particular God existed, and then you can demonstrate that your God has a set of objective morals. But I think even if your God exists, typically it goes the route of subjective morals anyways, because morality is determined by the mind of your God, which makes it subjective. So if morals were truly if morals were truly objective, meaning it didn't matter, they're not dependent on anybody's mind, nobody's mind at all, right? Then that means they're not dependent on God's mind either, which means God would be subject to morality as well, which means now there's something that God is subject to, right? So it just, using objective morals to validate God always just kind of ends in a circular argument.
Sure. So you said in order for the objective morality argument to work, you will need to prove that God exists first. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's actually my claim. I think using objective morals to prove God is never going to work, because in order to prove that you have objective morals, you would have to prove God first. And some people will try to get around that and say, well, they'll just insist that they are. They'll say, well, everyone agrees that, murdering somebody is wrong, but as it turns out, not everyone does agree, right? And then they'll say something silly like, well, the Bible says that the laws of God are written on your heart, and everyone actually knows what right and wrong is. They just choose not to follow it. But that's just not true. You can't validate that claim. You can't pretend to know what is in somebody's heart and mind. So the objective morality argument, to me, I know guys like C.S. Lewis made it popular. To me, I think it's one of the weakest arguments for God, especially because if it's true that your God exists and that all morals proceed from your God, then you have to justify all the heinous stuff that's in the book, like kidnapping women, owning slaves, making women.
But I think that's when, like, Frank Turk would turn around and he would say, or you're sitting on God's lap, slap him in the face, right? So you're judging God by the own standards of morality that you take from God, right?
I don't do that. You do. So the way I present these arguments is I never go out and say, God is evil because I said so, because he's doing these things. What I will always do every single time is, before we even open the Bible, I will ask you what you think is objectively right or wrong. And then I'll go into the Bible and I'll show you God endorsing that objectively wrong thing. And then I'll leave it to you to wrestle with. Because in my worldview, there's no such thing as objective right or wrong. There's only subjective right or wrong. Now, it's perfectly within my right to say, yes, in my subjective opinion, I think God is evil. I agree. But that is a subjective opinion. Like, I assume you don't think slavery was ever good, right?
Yeah, so that's and I'm sure everyone always says this when you bring this up, but that's one thing I'm looking into, the whole indentured servitude and all that kind of stuff. I've also heard someone say that, so you have, like, Cliff Kneckley, he talks about, so he kind of brings up the whole divorce situation as a reference point. He says, Pharisees came up and he said, what about divorce? God gave us divorce, so is it right for me to divorce my wife? And then Jesus said, I only gave you divorce because that's what you wanted on your hearts, but really it's not the ideal for me.
Right.
Paraphrasing here, right?
Sure.
So
but in your worldview, we see the character of God, because you think Jesus is part of God, right? So you see Jesus coming in and saying that this actually wasn't the intended thing, right? But we can literally only apply that to divorce. You can't apply that to every law of the Old Testament. Like, Jesus never came in and said, well, God didn't actually want you to own slaves, right? Because Jesus never said that. In fact, even Paul in the
It does not create a foundation that kind of structure can happen where God sets laws just because the Israelites or whoever isn't ready to receive, like, a full kind of version of the law, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, but then if you're left with that, the only law that was given as permissible, even though he didn't like it, was divorce. Jesus didn't say that about any of the other laws. In fact, he made the other laws more harsh. So what you have then, now you're going to make a conscious decision with your own mind, and you're going to say, well, since slavery is bad, this must have been one of those laws that God allowed, but he didn't actually like. But the book doesn't say that. And if you have the ability to go in and just say, well, it must be bad, and so that means God must have just allowed it even though he didn't like it, well, then what prevents me from doing that with everything else? Why can't I just say, well, it was, God said that, I don't know, that you can have multiple wives, But then again, that's a bad thing, so therefore you can't do it. Now, you can go on and on. All the different laws that God allowed in the Old Testament, you can go to every single one and just say, well, God didn't actually want to allow it. You see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
At that point, you're now just inserting your subjective opinion into the text.
Yeah, I get you. Okay.
Yeah. Osprey, thank you for the $5 super chat. Osprey says, Noah's Ark was in my Bob Jones University biology textbook. Listen, there's a reason why no one takes Bob Jones seriously in higher education, but I would love, if you still have that textbook, to let me know the name of it so I can buy a copy. Nothing would make me more excited to get a copy of an actual science textbook that Bob Jones used to teach their college students that says Noah's Ark was a real thing. Sorry about that, Josh. What else was it? What else?
No, you're good, man. You're good. So morality isn't really a strong argument that you would see.
No.
So what about the person of Jesus then? Obviously, you wouldn't say he never existed.
Well, I think Jesus existed, but I don't think that he did the things that the book says he did. You know what I mean? Like, there are hundreds of ancient texts from the time period that talk about miracle workers and people resurrecting from the dead and bodies going missing. And so, like, as far as I can tell, Jesus is just like one of many. And the stories that we have about him have like lots of contradictions in it. And so for me to believe that the Jesus story was real, I think my starting point would have to be that the book itself wouldn't have contradictions about the details of his life.
What contradictions are you referring to there?
Well, there's quite a bit. It doesn't know what time he was died. John and the other Gospels disagree on what day he was crucified. They don't agree on the order of events of his life. For example, in the book of John, he doesn't go into the wilderness for 40 days. The day after his baptism, he actually calls his disciples. But in the other Gospels, the day after his baptism, he goes into the wilderness and then he calls his disciples. And then next thing after he calls his disciples in the book of John, he actually goes and clears out the temple, flips over the money table, tables of the money changers and whatnot. But in the other Gospels, that doesn't happen until right before he's crucified. So we're left with all these weird things between the Gospels where in order to say that they're not contradicting each other, apologists have to say crazy things like it happened twice. He called his disciples twice. He flipped over the tables in the temple twice. Like you have all these, really outrageous claims.
So would you not call that divergent perspective then? If they're saying that the same thing, but they're slightly different?
Well, divergent perspective is not the issue. Right? For example, you and I could both witness a car crash, and you might say, yeah, the car came in, there was a red car that came in, and it hit this truck. And I might say, yeah, there was this truck came in, it was a white truck, and it hit this car. Well, we've got divergent perspectives, but the details that we're providing don't contradict each other. Now, if you said, I witnessed this car accident, and it was two cars, there were no trucks. And if I said I witnessed this accident and it was two trucks and no cars, now we've got a problem because only one of those statements could be true.
Right, but the statements of what happened are all the same according to the gospel narratives, right? It's just kind of the timeline. It's different.
Oh, no,
you're saying, right?
Not. Well, I mean, the timeline's off, but other things are wrong too. Like, for example, there's like nonsensical things. Like, for example, in the Gospel of John, it seems, if you're reading it quickly, that Mary Magdalene was the first one at the tomb. She went to the tomb alone, and then she ran and got John and Peter. And then John and Peter came to the tomb, and then the rest of the women. So in the Gospel of John, Mary Magdalene comes alone to the tomb first. And then in the other Gospels, Mary Magdalene is with the other women as they're going to the tomb. And they're even discussing, as they're walking to the tomb in the other Gospels, who's going to roll away the stone, which is a nonsense claim. Because in the Gospel of John, she was already there. She already saw the stone was rolled away, and she already went back. So they already know that the stone was rolled away. It's a nonsense conversation. But then because of Mark, there's a later edition in Mark chapter 16. So Mark was originally much shorter than what it is today. And in most modern Bibles, it will tell you where the cutoff is, right? Well, in that later addition to Mark, they attempt to reconcile the fact that Mary Magdalene saw the resurrected Jesus first before the other women and disciples did, according to the Gospel of John. So it says at the very ending of Mark that he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, and that is great that they tried to make that correction. The problem is, in doing so, they kind of unintentionally created some problems, because if you read that Mary Magdalene went to the tomb alone by herself and then saw Jesus first, then the rest of the story doesn't make sense. Like when they're walking to the tomb and they don't know what they're going to do with the stone. Or, for example, if you go further down in John 21, Mary Magdalene says they've taken his body and we don't know where they've put it. Oh, well, maybe there were women with Mary Magdalene and they just didn't say it, right? So to me, like, the resurrection narrative is the most important narrative in all of the Bible. And there's a bunch of details that are just inconsistent. And you would think that if this book was holy, it was from God, that you wouldn't need a PhD to go through this and try to sort everything out.
Sure, but I think some apologists would say that because the other text where Mary's by herself, it doesn't specifically say that she was by herself.
Right.
Where other texts say she was with other women, so they kind of make that claim that it doesn't need to be that specific because it's kind of alluded in a sense, or it doesn't specifically make the story different. If I'm saying that right?
No, I agree. That's why I'm saying is if you read John carefully, it's not entirely clear if she was actually alone, because she could have been with somebody, which is why she said we. Of course, she could have been using we in the figurative sense. We don't know that. But
sure,
if we assume that Mary Magdalene wasn't completely alone the first time she went, then we've got a problem, because the Gospel of Mark, in the later edition, goes in and tries to make it appear as though she was the first one there and that she was alone. Right. Gotcha. So the Gospel, whoever wrote the edition to the Gospel of Mark was reading John, and it was their opinion that according to John, she did go alone, right? So that little addition to Mark kind of screwed the pooch to harmonize the passage. Now, you can throw the longer ending out. A lot of people have. Some people will just say, listen, I don't accept the longer ending to Mark, right? And that's one way to help resolve some of the problem. But if we're in the business of throwing out Bible passages, there's a bunch of them that I would throw out. That's not the only one. Like when he, in John chapter 8, when he chooses to not have the woman stoned who was caught in adultery, that's not original to the text. That wasn't added until the 6th century.
That's one thing I've been trying to work through, trying to understand a little bit more on. Yeah,
there's a bunch of passages like that really shouldn't be there, but because of tradition, we have them. But we have a lot of contradictions in the Bible. And to me, I think some of the more compelling contradictions are when, like, the gospel authors or Paul or Jesus just can't read the Old Testament properly. And to me, that's the most damning evidence I need, right? So, for example, Paul misquotes the book of Numbers, in, I think, chapter 25 in the book of Corinthians. Jesus misquotes both Psalm 8 and also Isaiah 61, verses 1 and 2. He misquotes them, and he takes them completely out of the context. Like, so, for example, I'll put it on the...
Sorry, I've never heard that before, so if you don't mind, give me the references for that so I can look that up.
Right. Let's go to Luke chapter 4, and I don't think you can see the screen, but everybody else can see the screen. I'll put it up.
Yeah, I'll just search up on my computer.
Not a problem. I'll put it up for everyone else to read. All right. Give me 1 second.
What was it? Luke chapter 4.
Yeah, Luke chapter 4, and scroll on down to, let's see, about verse 17. And if you're watching this on your phone or on YouTube, let me know if any of the text is cut off. I can adjust the positioning of the text here, and we can get it straightened out. It's not too big of an issue.
And what was the other verse? Numbers, you said?
Well, we'll do them at a time. Don't worry about all of them at
okay.
once. Right.
Yeah, cool.
So this is what happens in the synagogue with Jesus. It says, we'll start in verse 16. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and as was his custom, and he stood up to read. The scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And then he cut off the rest of the sentence, which we'll get to in a second. So the first problem we have here is that's not actually what Isaiah 61 verse 1 and 2 says. It's some of the stuff is out of order and some of it's actually missing. So if you compare it to Isaiah 61 1 and 2 in your Bible, you'll notice that some stuff is either missing or added. And you might say, well, obviously it's because he was quoting it from the Greek instead of the Hebrew, which happens a lot in the New Testament. They quote the Greek instead of the Hebrew, but it doesn't match the Greek either. I've got a comparison of both of them. But here's the biggest issue. He says in verse 20, it says, he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. Okay, cool. So the scripture, like if we just assume that Jesus is right, that this scripture has been fulfilled in him, then what we probably ought to, because it's very vague, right? It just says the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and he to preach the good news, proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, so on and so forth, right? This is pretty vague. But if we go to Isaiah 61 is not vague at all. Isaiah 61 tells you exactly what the passage is about. And as it turns out, it has nothing to do with the Messiah. So it says in Isaiah 61:1, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me because the Lord has anointed me and he has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, which wasn't part of the quotation in the New Testament, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and release to the prisoners, and proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God. Funny that he left out that part, right? It's all one sentence, but he just cut that part out. And then he says, and comfort to all those who mourn, to provide for those who mourn in Zion. Now we're actually really getting specific. To provide for those who mourn in Zion, and to give them a garland instead of ashes, and oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of the mantle of faint spirit. They will be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, to display his glory. They shall build up the ancient ruins, and they shall raise up the former devastation. So now we're actually getting really specific, because Isaiah was written this section of Isaiah was written right as the Israelites were being freed from the Babylonian captivity, roughly 538, 539 BCE. This is a prophecy that God is saying, when you return from your captivity, you're returning from the land here shortly, God is going to restore your land. He's going to build up the ancient ruins. They're going to be just like they were in the former times, right? So when you actually go back and read the context of Isaiah 61, it doesn't have anything to do with the Messiah. This is just a promise that he's going to restore their fortunes after the Babylonian exile, which he says in the book of Isaiah like a dozen different times.
Right.
So it certainly couldn't be about Jesus.
Okay.
And to me,
Interesting. I've never.
all of the prophecies in the New Testament read just like this. For example, if I go to Hosea 11, this might be my favorite example. And I'm sorry for everyone here if you've heard me do this 1,000 times, but this is my favorite one. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. And the more that I called them, the more that they went from me, and they kept sacrificing to the Baals and offering incense to idols. Well, this is a telling of history, is it not? Right? This is about the Exodus?
Yeah.
Right. So the problem is when we get to the book of Matthew, if you go to Matthew chapter 2, I think verse like 15 to 16, somewhere in there. Let me see if that's right. Yeah. Says yeah.
Chapter 2, 15.
Right.
Yeah.
It says that they went to Egypt, right? And they remained there until the death of Herod. And this was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, out of Egypt I have called my son. But there's no actual prophecy in Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. It's not a prophecy. It's just a short retelling of the Exodus narrative before an actual prophecy is going to be given later in the chapter. So like, and it would be interesting if like this was the only occurrence, like if this was the only time that Matthew just randomly grabbed something out of context and called it a prophecy. But the problem is every time Matthew quotes from the Old Testament, he does it like this. It's just random out of context quotations. They're not
Right, because I think I
prophecies.
heard you say the other day as well that Jesus fulfilled zero prophecies. Was that your claim, or is
Yeah.
that something I misheard?
No, you got it. Yeah, zero prophecies, and it shocked me the first time I discovered it. I was still a Christian when I first discovered it, and I was challenged by another Christian who kind of already deconstructed, already graduated from Bible college, and was like, "I don't think he actually fulfilled any of those prophecies, Justin." And I was like, "Oh, come on, of course he did, right?"
Hmm.
Then I went back and read them all, and it's like, "Oh, he didn't. He didn't. It's all hogwash, right?" And I said, "Maybe he's still the Messiah. Who knows? Maybe." There's a way to rationalize this, but as it turns out, over the number of years, I never found a good way to rationalize it other than, the New Testament authors were practicing a heavy amount of coping, and they were doing post hoc rationalization.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because that was yeah, that's interesting. That's something I want to look into as well, because I didn't really understand if that was kind of like, I don't know, if you were joking a little bit when you said zero prophecies, because people say it's like what 300 or some prophecies that he's fulfilled. And I
Right.
haven't really looked into the prophecies all that much,
Yeah.
so I was a bit taken back when you said that.
I think the first, maybe the second or third, I think maybe the third live I ever did on TikTok. I said, you know what we're going to do? Cause this is before anyone was watching me. I had like 2 people watching me, and I was like, what
Right.
can I do to fill my time? So I downloaded the list of the 350 prophecies. I spent like 3 hours just going through every single one, and every single one of them is clearly not even a prophecy. Most of them are just like we find in Matthew. They're just random out of context quotations. Like when it says, for example, that not one of his bones will be broken. Well, that is actually quoted in the book of John, but like that's not a prophecy. There's no prophecy about the Messiah's bones not being broken. That's from Exodus chapter 12 when it talks about the Passover lamb, but it's just instructions. God's just telling them, hey, when you slaughter the lamb, don't break its bones. It's not a prophecy.
Isn't that okay? I mean, it's kind of referring to Jesus Christ being the Passover lamb, right?
Well, he couldn't be the Passover lamb. Passover lamb didn't take anyone's sins away.
The scapegoat.
The scapegoat's not the Passover lamb. The scapegoat's in Leviticus chapter 16. And if you assume that he's a scapegoat, you got a bigger problem, because God in Leviticus 16, when he gives the instructions to Moses for the scapegoat ritual, he tells Moses and Aaron that this will be a perpetual ritual for you every single year forever. So if God is going to put an end to it, then that means he lied in Leviticus.
Right. Okay. I see.
Right. But even if we didn't have any of the scapegoat imagery, let's imagine that the only imagery we find in the New Testament is that of the Passover lamb. It's kind of a meaningless imagery. It doesn't mean anything. The Passover lamb is just a symbol that was on the doorpost that told the angel of death, this isn't the house. Go into another house, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that being said, there's no prophecy there. Like you can't just take a random story from the Old Testament and say, "Oh, it's a prophecy now," right? That's nonsense. A prophecy is something spoken by an actual prophet that's from God, that's revealing information about the future or something happening in the present, which is why Amos, God says to Amos, I think in chapter 3, he says, chapter 3 or 5, I forget which one, he says that he doesn't do anything without first revealing it through his prophets, which is kind of problematic because the whole narrative with like the typological prophecies that the New Testament endorses is that, well, the prophecies that we have about Jesus are actually hidden. They're hidden prophecies. They're not real prophecies, right? But the problem is that contradicts what God says. God says, I don't do anything until I reveal it through my prophets. He's going to tell you what's going to happen. He doesn't have to hide it. It doesn't have to be a secret. And he did give very clear prophecies about the Messiah. You find them in Isaiah chapter 2, Isaiah chapter 11. You'll find it again in Micah chapter 4 and 5, Jeremiah chapter 23 and 33. You get a little bit in Micah chapter 5, Zechariah chapter 9. So like we do have clear prophecies about the Messiah. It's not like he needed to fill in the gaps with non-prophecies.
Right. Okay. Very cool.
But yeah, man, Josh, I appreciate you talking to me, though. I mean, anything else?
Yeah, cheers, man. Look, I think I just want to kind of just pick your brain a little bit, see what you have to say. Because I only came across it the other day, so I was like, let's see what's going on.
Sure. Yeah, well, thanks for coming up, man.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no problem. Cheers for your time.
Cheers, Josh. He was all right. He was a good kid. You say he was 23? He's not a kid. At 23, you're an adult. All right, we'll grab the next guest in here. How you doing, Al?
Yo, what's up, brother?
Are you at least 18?
31.
Fantastic. And do you believe in a particular God?
Right now I'm studying all religions, all the different types of religions, if you want the honest truth.
That's what we're looking for, right? Okay, so what would be the most compelling argument for any God at all?
I just want to tell you, like, as a brother to brother, and as like as my love for human beings. One thing about what you're doing, I'm not saying that it's negative, nor
Did you come
it's
here to
positive.
tone police, or did you want to have a discussion?
No. I just came to like tell you, like, if somebody finds peace in their God and you're trying to prove that God is imaginary, that's like you taking away the peace from another human being. If that brings them peace,
Did someone force you to be here?
No, not at all.
Oh,
This is on my own free will.
Did you come to my platform?
I always look at you and Jeff for Truth's platform, and y'all sound like some butthurt lesbians that always talk about the same thing.
Oh, okay. So you came to my platform to cry that I have an opinion that's different than yours.
No, I came to your platform to say that
you came to cry. Let's get some baby bottles in the chat for the guest, guys. He's having a hard day. He needs to have his nappy changed.
People can't read and agree with whatever their
Listen, I agree. It's tough to have diaper rash. Nobody likes it. It's really difficult.
I'm telling you that what you're doing is like,
we can get some Vaseline in the house if you need, a little bit of lubrication to alleviate the chafing.
It's nonchalant. It's irrelevant.
They make a good powder for that.
If somebody finds peace in something,
you have to be a little bit careful, though.
Why would you try and take that away from somebody?
Listen, I'm not going to your house. I'm not going to your space telling you what to believe.
Because you sound like a butthurt lesbian talking about the same thing over and over.
Listen, the butthurt lesbian. First of all,
mad that your prayers didn't get answered.
First of all, there's no such thing as.
Just because your prayers didn't get answered doesn't mean that you got to try and deconvert the whole world now.
Listen, none of my prayers went unanswered because, as it turns out, I didn't pray for things all that often because I actually have everything that I need because I'm a white male in America. There's not actually much that I need to pray about. So the reason why I do this is because I believe it's good to believe things that are true. Do you think that humanity should believe what's true?
What do you accomplish out of this?
Do you believe that it's good for humanity to believe things that are true?
You don't accomplish shit out of this.
I'm going to need you to answer a question and stop being a crybaby. Do you believe it's good for humanity to believe things that are true?
I believe that you should do something productive because you're not accomplishing.
All right. You can go cry somewhere else. Listen, if you disagree with me and you don't like me, that's great. That's fine. People disagree with me all day, but I want to have an actual discussion with people who disagree with me. If you just came to cry, you can go cry somewhere else. You can go cry in your mama's lap. That's nothing I need to hear. All right, we do need a Christian or a believer of some kind in the queue. Our queue on YouTube is empty. Frankenstein, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says if their peace is lost that easy, their God is weak. Also, yay to lesbians. I was about to say, and I couldn't get around to it. There's no such thing as a lesbian insult here. We love lesbians. How can you insult somebody by calling them a lesbian when we literally love them around here? I mean, I don't know what to say. But anyways, he's lost in his feelings. When you're so upset that somebody else has a differing opinion than you that you have to go and cry in their live, you got big problems. I'm not a Jehovah's Witness. I don't go door to door. I don't try to tell your children that they have to believe what I believe. I'm not forcing this on anybody. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here. We need to tap, like, and share, because we're still in TikTok jail. We can't get anything out to the algorithm. So the last 3 weeks after the last 3 weeks of lives after I got my account back, I've been looking at my statistics. They're not putting me on literally anybody's feed other than my own followers. There's not a single Christian, hardly at all, that's seeing this. I've done a million restarts. Nothing helps. I've tried to go through an agent, and the agent says my account is locked. It's a mess. I'm in TikTok jail. I don't know what else to say. Guys, don't get your account banned. If you get your account banned enough, they put you in TikTok jail. I don't know how long you go there for, but I'm there. Anyways. Willie says he can never see your live. I know the last couple of weeks, people keep coming into my live and saying, hey, it didn't even show you were live. I know, because I'm in TikTok jail. They're like, we can't even find your account unless we search for it. I know, I'm in TikTok jail. That's why I'm trying to prioritize doing more on YouTube, because at least YouTube doesn't do this stupid shit where, like, if you say a bad word, they put you in jail for a month. It's the craziest thing. The fact that TikTok is run by AI police, and if you just utter the wrong word or you say something inoffensive, they'll literally completely, block your account from being seen by people that aren't following you. It's the craziest thing. Anyways, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to come up. We have no opposition. If we can't get any opposition here in a couple of minutes, I'll probably do a restart. In fact, I'll probably restart YouTube and TikTok because I want to get the Facebook stream working. I was going live tonight basically to see if I can get the Facebook live stream added into the stream, and it rejected me. It said, no, we can't do it. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. But if you want to join on the Facebook side of things, there is a link in the description of the video. I probably should have said that. Maybe I should put it on the screen. Oh, I did right there. Join link in video description. So if you want to join the discussion, there is a link where you can join on YouTube, and you don't have to have an account anywhere. You don't even have to have a YouTube account to do it. You just have to have a phone or a camera and a microphone. Welcome in, Jack.
Hey.
Jack, are you at least 18?
Yes.
Are you a believer or a heathen?
I'm a heathen.
Oh, welcome to reality. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was raised in the church for 20 years. And homosexuality is something that I find to be very confusing about why is that an issue? Why is that a problem? When I look at the text, I really don't, I'm not seeing it. And so I was just hoping that you might be able to enlighten me.
Yeah, so the problem we have is let me give you an example. Have you met lots of people that were Christians and then they became atheists?
Yeah.
One of the first things that happens when people deconvert from Christianity is they typically become an ally of the LGBTQ. And the reason is because there is no reason to be against it. There is absolutely zero reason to be against it other than their book says so, which is why the first thing they do is a huge turnaround when they leave the religion, because they're like, oh, that's bullshit. There's no reason to dislike these people. There's no reason to oppress these people. The book is nonsense, right? If there was a legitimate reason for it, then this wouldn't be 100% trend. I don't know a single person that left Christianity and then became an atheist and still against gay marriage. It's crazy. It never happens. It doesn't happen. The problem we have, though, is that the book definitely does poo-poo on same-sex relationships. So you've got laws in Leviticus against it. You've got Romans chapter 1 that's pretty clear, that's describing, the same-sex relationships as being debased and sinful and whatnot. So the book's not for it. And to me, the fact that the book is against it is another reason to just take it out back and burn it.
Yeah, my bigger concern is, Old Testament stuff. I'm, as far as I understand, there's like a little verse that's like, hey, guys can't sleep with guys, and then it's also like, hey, you can't eat bacon, and
Right.
obviously a lot of assholes eat bacon. I do too. I like bacon,
Right.
but
Well, I think
but the New Testament, that's what I think is the worry for Christians, and I'm not a Christian, but the worry for them is the new word is what to believe, and so they don't necessarily have to adhere to the old word. So the new word, I think Paul, like you said in Romans, has something about man cannot lay with man, and I don't know the original Hebrew. I don't know the original whatever language it was, but that's my question and concern is, we don't, do we know the original translation? Are we far removed from it?
I don't think we're really far removed from the Q&A Greek. We know it pretty well, actually. But like Romans chapter 1 is clearly suggesting that same-sex relationships is sinful. And then we've got also in Corinthians, it talks about the men who go to bed with other men.
Yeah.
Now, some people have gone and said, well, Corinthians could possibly be referring to pederasty, but to be realistic, the practice of pederasty kind of already died out by Paul's time. It wasn't something that you would have seen. It was something that you would have seen, 100 or 200 years before Paul. So I'm not really sure that's what he's addressing. It really just seems that he's addressing male-on-male relations. And he addresses female-on-female relations in the first chapter of Romans. It says in Romans chapter 1, let me grab the passage, for example. We'll put it on the screen so we can all see it. While we're doing that, James, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I appreciate that, James. This is Romans chapter 1. It says, therefore God gave them over in the desires of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them over to dishonorable passion. Their females exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural. In the same way, also the males, giving up natural intercourse with females, were consumed with their passionate desires for one another. Males committed shameless acts with males and received their own persons in due penalty for their error. So Paul, like, if you believe that Paul speaks for God, then you have to believe that God is not for same-sex unions. But again, I mean, Paul was a heretic anyways. Paul broke like a dozen different laws from Deuteronomy.
Okay, that's something I was not privy to.
Yeah. But if you throw Paul out of the Bible, then it's a little bit harder to make a case for Christianity being against it. But the problem is you definitely can't throw Paul out of the Bible for Christians, because most Christians don't realize it, but almost all of their doctrines come from Paul, not Jesus.
But does Paul belong in a canon Bible?
Paul belongs in a loony bin is what he does. That guy was insane. Why would you take marriage advice from a guy who was never married? It's crazy.
And another question, I became very interested in, excuse me, what do you call the books that were excluded?
The Apocrypha?
Apocrypha, yes, sir.
Yeah, they were in almost every single Bible until the 19th century. Like, I've got an 1823 King James Bible behind me that still has him.
Yeah, so like, what to me that was the breaking point for me. I learned about the Apocrypha, and my mom was a bit of a zealous nut, and she was very into, that weird shit where people are praying and barking like dogs and stuff. Yeah. Pentecostal. And to me, when I learned about Apocrypha, I was like, then all of this is fake, because all you've ever done is decided what was appropriate or not for your time or for your power, I suppose. And so my question to you is, what do you think about Apocrypha and what lasts and what doesn't last, and is it all dog shit? I guess it's all dog shit, but yeah.
I think it is all dog shit. But to be fair, I think the Apocrypha does belong in the canon. It's canonized in basically every Christian denomination other than Protestantism. I went through a couple years ago, and I went through every single quotation of the Apocrypha within the Church Fathers up till Jerome. I stopped after Jerome.
Okay.
Every single time one of the Church Fathers quoted from the Apocrypha, whether it was a sermon or a letter, they referred to it as scripture, as prophecy, as being from God, as being divine word. So it wasn't until way after Jerome that anybody even questioned whether or not it's actually scripture. So for me, like if we think that the early church, the people who gave us the Bible anyways, if we think that they should be the people who necessarily decided what the Bible was, then we have to include the Apocrypha. Justin Martyr even quotes from it and says that it prophesied the coming of Jesus, and he chastised the Jews for trying to get rid of it. He actually said that the Jewish people were purposely trying to get rid of some of the apocryphal books in an attempt to make the Bible look like it doesn't support Jesus as the Messiah. So like people in the early church were literally fighting to keep it in the canon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Catholic, thank you. The New Testament does quote from it. I've documented this as well. The New Testament quotes a number of times from the Apocrypha, and there are parts of the Apocrypha that there are parts of the New Testament, I mean, that only make sense if you've read the Apocrypha, like the giving of alms. There's no alms giving in the Old Testament, nothing. But guess what? It does show up in the Apocrypha works, right? And then there are like the resurrection of the dead. Like we get a tiny hint of it in Daniel chapter 12. But when you read the Apocrypha, it's all over the Apocrypha. What about hell? Hell's never mentioned in the Old Testament. But you know what is? It's mentioned in the Apocrypha. It's all over the Apocrypha. So like we have a lot of these New Testament concepts that don't show up in the Old Testament, but they're all throughout the apocryphal works. And so when you remove the apocryphal books, like you're removing the context of the New Testament culture.
Wow. I didn't have the gumption personally to sit down and read the Apocrypha. I basically just learned that it was not canon, and there were people in, I'm assuming, the Catholic Church that they got to tell me what, or all of us, what we should read. And I was like, you know what, fuck this. You know, like if you're gonna tell me what to do and you're a human being, I don't care.
Right. Well, I'll leave you on this because I've got a believer that wants to come in. I'll leave you on this. If mankind can just willy-nilly decide what is scripture and what isn't scripture, then what faith do you have that God is doing any sort of supernatural work to preserve his word if we can just remove it?
Right.
It's crazy.
I really appreciate it, Deconstructor. You're the man.
Thanks so much. Good to hear from you, Mita. Big dubs for Jack. Deconstruction is not easy. All right, we got a Christian, I think, in the queue. We'll pull him in, and then it looks like we've got one on YouTube next. I see you over on YouTube, G, trying to get in. Welcome in, Repent, Believe, Follow. Are you with us? Hello? Hola? ¿Cómo está? Auf Wiedersehen? Oh, he's gone. Okay, well, we will try again. We'll see if we can get the next one in here. We've got, G is the name. G coming through on the YouTube stream. How you doing, G? Necro, thank you for the hats. And Ryan as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Guys, thank you so much for being here. I know it's an off night. I'm just doing some software testing here tonight, trying to see what's possible. I was trying to get the Facebook stream working. It's not. Facebook stream is not working. I don't know what's wrong with Facebook. I'll have to figure it out. Maybe I'll try again tomorrow night to get Facebook working. I'll have to read the instruction manual and see what I'm doing wrong. But that guest says they're here. G, no one can hear you. It says that you're on the live. I can see the black box from your camera that's turned off. Hold on, let me try something else. What about now?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that was my fault. We're good to go now.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome in.
Hey, oh, thank you. What's good?
Not too much. We're just doing some debates. Are you at least 18? Because
Yeah, for sure.
we
Yeah.
do have some age restrictions here.
Oh, no, you're great.
And then, are you a believer or an atheist or somewhere in between?
I believe. And then, I mean, so when we talk, man, especially in high level debates, semantics is such a big pivot point for people who debate or present arguments. When you say believe, there's things I think about, there's things I know, there's things I believe. And I think there's differences in each of those.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So there's things I think, there's things I believe, and there's things I know.
That's fine. So if there's something you believe in, like God, that's what we're talking about. I'm not suggesting that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God exists, but you definitely believe that God exists, right?
Right. There's a belief based on things I think and things I know. And
right.
What I don't want to do is get into...
Oh, where'd he go? My queue just emptied out on, it just cut everybody. And now he's back. Let me see what happened here. I don't know if this is something that happened with Streamlabs. Sorry, G, I don't know what happened, but Streamlabs just kind of like took a hiccup on me.
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm going to ask you a question. Let me read the super chat first. It's Just K. Sure. Thank you so much for being a member and for the super chat. The $9.99 super chat says, I don't understand how a group that preaches about kindness is so focused on hatred to all of my LGBTQ brothers and sisters. They be loved. And I agree. Yeah, to me, it's not always that they pick their groups of people to be mad at in different time periods. For example, in like the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was anyone who was divorced. If you were divorced, you were like anathema to the church. I knew a number of women that were more or less forced out of their church after they got divorced. But eventually it blows over. It becomes so common in culture that religious people who use it to hate on others will move on to something new. So eventually they'll move on from the LGBTQ hate and they'll move on to hate somebody else. I'm sure of it. But gee, sorry about the rabbit trail there. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I'm not saying that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that your God exists, but what would be the most compelling argument for your God existing? And Dr. Joe, thank you so much for the caps. Welcome to the live here on Tuesday night, Dr. Joe. Guys, make sure you're dropping Dr. Joe a follow. She's magnificent.
All right. Well, again, back to the defining the words we use when we're having this discussion. Something you asked about was faith, and then, I mean, the first thing I would ask is, what do you think, or what do you believe, or what do you know faith is to be? So for you, what is faith? For me, could you tell me what faith is?
Yeah, well, I think the Christian definition of faith and the secular definition typically differ. So, for example, in the secular world, we would say, like, I have faith that my car is going to start, right? But we are using that word differently than you. The Bible defines faith as basically the belief in the unseen, right? The belief in the unknowable.
Sure. Where does it do that?
Right. Book of Hebrews, chapter 11.
Specifically?
Yeah. Want me to read it?
Yeah, sure, please.
I will put up. It says, faith is the belief in things unseen and the evidence of things. I forget the rest of the quote.
Yeah, no. What's that second part you said?
In things unseen.
And?
All right, so I'll put it on the screen so we can all read it. It says, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. although
Keep going.
it's different in each translation. It says,
No, no.
"Indeed, by faith our ancestors received approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible." So the author of the book of Hebrews is suggesting that the faith
Right. Correct.
is in
back to
the thing that is unseen. It's the thing that we believe, but we don't have necessarily, the tangible evidence.
yeah. Back to when you very first started coining. Did I hear the word evidence?
I use the word evidence because some of the translations say the word evidence.
Okay. So, and then back to your first, maybe it was analogy where we're talking about when we try to start a car.
Right. Yeah. So in the secular world, when we say something like "I have faith that my car is going to start," what we're not saying is that we have faith in the unknowable or the unseen. We're saying that, I've got these historical data points that would
Right. You have a confidence in something based on evidence.
Yeah. So it's more or less like a reasonable confidence in something, right?
Right. So I think through time and generations and people, because we're all those, I think the term faith has changed where
right, but
maybe
listen,
early Christians have said, I have faith in God because.
Listen, I had to mute you. No one really cares to define the definition of faith. I think we're just wasting everybody's time. What I want to talk about is the actual evidence. Whether or not we're using the word faith in the same way is not an appealing argument or discussion, and it doesn't do anything for proving the validity of your God. So if you don't mind, I'd like to get the conversation actually on topic, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. So what would be the most compelling evidence or argument for your God being real?
I'm waiting for you to unmute.
You're not muted.
Oh, solid. So, is there a point where I'm going to have the ability to mute? Because if you have any high level type of discussions or debates, the first thing you do is define terms so that we don't argue semantics. And then when definitions of words do come up, we don't just mute the other person. We get to a base knowledge of understanding.
Okay, well, let me just help you understand. So this is not a high level debate.
Help.
We don't have a moderator here. We're not laying out a whole PowerPoint presentation. We're having a dialogue. And we can,
I'm not muting you to have my dialogue.
Yeah, and I am muting you because you keep talking over me. And what I don't want to do is spend a half hour defining terms that everybody already knows. You're wasting everyone's time. Everybody here, all 500 people on TikTok and 230 people on YouTube, we've all heard define the word faith 4 million times. You're not helping anybody. So let's just get on to the actual arguments if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
So what would be the argument or the evidence that would be compelling for your case?
In the way of evidence, do you have a specific question or?
I don't have questions.
Okay, solid. So are we talking about?
I mean, okay. I could ask you some questions. You want me to ask you some questions?
We don't want to talk about faith.
I'll ask you a good question then.
We don't want to talk about evidence defining the terms.
Okay, I've got a question. Why do you think that Jesus is the Messiah?
Do you believe the Odyssey or the Iliad or the
listen, I don't know what you think you're doing here. Why do you think that Jesus is a Messiah?
I'm speaking with you.
I know, and you asked me if I had questions, and now I've got a question. Why do you think that Jesus is the Messiah?
Based on the evidence.
What's the evidence?
66,000 manuscripts with over 63,799 cross-references in the Bible, written by over 40 authors over the span of 1,500 years, most of which who never met each other.
You don't think that this talking point is going to work, do you?
The same way I think.
All right, well, I'll just address your bad talking point. So first of all, the fact that there's multiple authors is completely useless. We've got the same thing. In fact, I've got a book right here. That is composed of quite literally thousands of authors. And it turns out that having lots of authors from the same culture doesn't make the book special.
They weren't from the same culture.
They were from the same culture. All of the people who wrote the Bible.
3 different.
I'm going to mute you since you keep talking over me and you don't have any Holy Spirit patience. So the fact that there's multiple authors is meaningless to me. They were all part of the same culture. They all came from the same ethno-religious group. Jeremiah was the one who wrote on the African continent. So that's not an actual special thing. Jeremiah was an Israelite. He was from the land of Israel. He wrote on the additional continent during the exile. So if I left America and I wrote down in Mexico, that is nothing special. That's meaningless to me. The other continent is technically the island of Patmos, if you believe that John wrote something on the island of Patmos. And again, John was a Jew. So every single text of the Bible was written by somebody who was part of that particular ethno-religious group. That's meaningless to me. What I'm more concerned with is whether or not the book itself is even coherent and whether or not it's true. And before I unmute you, I'll just address the manuscripts. Most of the manuscripts are not anywhere near the time of writing. For example, the oldest manuscripts we have of the Pentateuch is 2 little tiny scrolls, the Ketef Hinnom scrolls from the 6th century, and they have a tiny little snippet from the Book of Numbers as part of a blessing. That's almost 1,000 years after the events. The New Testament manuscripts aren't much better. We don't have any complete manuscripts of the New Testament until the end of the 3rd century, and almost all of the manuscripts, and I'll put it on the screen because I'm sure you've never seen it, and some of the guests might not have seen it, but what you're going to find is there's a distribution of manuscripts. And it's interesting that almost all of the New Testament manuscripts that we have, funny enough, come from the early medieval period. These aren't manuscripts anywhere near the time of Jesus. The fact that a bunch of people in the medieval period were really good at copying says nothing to whether or not the contents of the manuscripts are indeed true. And now you're unmuted.
Yeah. Hey, brother, could you just explain to me the mute process?
Yeah, the mute process is when you ask me a question and then I start talking and then you rudely talk over top of me so I can't answer the question. Then I have to mute you. So if you act like a child, I'll mute you.
Okay. What happens if the inverse occurs?
Then you can do whatever you want, whatever recourse of action you think you want to do.
No, I get it, but I can't mute you and explain my point.
Yeah, you're in my house. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's easy to win like that.
It's not easy to win. I have to mute. I have to mute you when you talk over me. Well, you notice how I've been live now for over an hour, and you're the first person that got muted. Do you think that maybe you're the problem?
No.
Okay.
When you're saying that I don't know what the issue is, why aren't people coming in? Why aren't people talking? I don't know if there's system errors.
It's not system errors. This is how TikTok works.
You didn't state that earlier?
No, I didn't. Sounds like you listen as well as you talk. All right, so enough with the crying, and let's continue with the bad arguments.
No crying. What's the next question? I mean,
my question was whether or not you had a good reason to believe that Jesus was the Messiah. And
I said based on the evidence, and then when I began to present the evidence, you tried to interject, and when I began to explain, you muted me, talked over me, and then that became the focal point, and we got way off topic.
Okay, so more crying. Okay. So what's the evidence other than the many manuscripts?
Well, what basis on historical evidence is there of anything other than reliable historical evidence, i.e. what people write, what people document, archaeological, geological evidence that we have discussed none of.
Okay, I'd love to hear it. What's the evidence for Jesus?
Okay, one is historical documentation. What is the number one reason that people can apply to this is truth? Would that be what we write, or what we photograph, or what we document? Right? That's historical evidence, what we document. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, photographs and documentations are historical, but are you aware that sometimes
before photograph, what was the historical documentation of any?
Okay, so I'm just going to mute you again because you wouldn't let me answer your question. I don't know why you can't let me answer a question. So your question was whether or not that is historical documentation, and I tried to give you an answer, and then you cut me off. So yes, documentation, written, photograph, etched in stone, those are historical documentation. But sometimes historical documentation says things that are untrue. For example, you don't believe that Nero resurrected from the dead. You don't believe in Herodotus Book 4 that a man named Aristeus resurrected from the dead either. You certainly don't believe that Honi the circle drawer was receiving revelation from God and could control the weather. There's lots of stuff written in ancient books that you don't believe. So just saying that it's written in a book isn't actually evidence. You need something better than somebody said something. Also, thank you for the $5 super chat. Jesus lied. Read the Bible. Nice job on staying calm and owning your callers based on what is written in the Bible. Christians are notoriously dishonest. I know this one, I don't know if he's dishonest, but he's definitely a crybaby already. I want to talk about what's actually written in the Bible.
Am I unmuted? I'm unsure how this works.
Yeah, you're unmuted right now.
Okay, solid. So I think one perspective is that we're talking about a book. So if I wrote a book that was 1,500 pages, that would be me writing a single book versus a compilation of books. So when you try to discredit the Bible as a book, it's not one book. It's many books, 66 plus books, again, written by over 40 people over the span of 1,500 years on 3 different continents, over 3 different languages.
Repeating the
Greek,
same bad talking
Hebrew.
point doesn't make it better.
Good. I just want to, hey, I'm not sure what has happened.
We all heard the
previously.
broken talking point already.
Not sure what you have heard previously on the channel or prior to. But to discredit that as a single book with some inconsistencies, if you could point out some inconsistencies, maybe we can start there.
So glad you asked.
Yeah.
Jesus lied. Read the Bible. Thank you for the $5 super chat. He says the historical documents in the Bible prove Jesus is a false Messiah. This caller needs to read his Bible more carefully. I agree, and we're going to do that right now. Okay. So now, as it turns out, we've got a couple problems with the Bible other than the inconsistency. I want to address the point that you made prior. The point that you made prior is that you've got multiple books within the Bible, and everyone knows that. But as it turns out, basically none of them were actually eyewitnesses to the events. Mark was the cousin of Barnabas, according to Colossians. We don't even know if Mark wrote Mark. His name was attributed to it by church history. It is a completely anonymous gospel. Whoever wrote Matthew and Luke lived after Mark, or roughly the same time as Mark, because they copied from Mark. So certainly they couldn't have been eyewitnesses to anything. Matthew is very unlikely to have written Matthew, in that Matthew was an actual disciple. But when he copies his own conversion story as the tax collector, he talks about himself in the third person. Nobody does that. That's preposterous. The book of Luke clearly wasn't written anywhere near the same time as Mark. It was written much later after, and we find lots of the details in Luke are literally changing the details in Mark to make them fit better, which is, to me, just evidence that it wasn't written anywhere near the time period. In fact, there has been philology and stylometric analysis done on the Gospel of Luke that would date it firmly into the 2nd century, which is when I think it was actually written. Some of it was written then. Some of it was written prior. It's a compilation. The Gospel of John, we have no idea who wrote it, but the Gospel of John has multiple authors. They identify themselves in the 21st chapter. They identify themselves in the 1st chapter. There are multiple authors of the Gospel of John, which is why they refer to themselves as a we. That being all done and said, Paul wasn't an eyewitness to the resurrection. He fell off his horse and bumped his head and had a visitation with Jesus. That's meaningless to me. So none of these people appear to actually be eyewitnesses to anything. And even if they somehow were eyewitnesses to anything, that doesn't mean I actually have to believe what they say, for the same reason that you don't believe what other ancient eyewitnesses have to say. Now, before we move on to actually looking at the problems inside of the Bible, would you like to address what I said?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of claims. They say, it has been said. I think just as much scholarly effort has been made on both sides to make claims of authenticity for what has been written and laid out and authenticated for both sides. I mean, I'm sure there's an argument that is able to be made that it is or it isn't authentic, right? You can cite secular scholarly authors versus Christian apologists who think in the same way about the scripture towards its validity. So versus what you say a secular scholar says versus what I say a Christian apologist says or a scholar has said in the way of Christianity and its authenticity. I mean, it's just a back and forth. I mean, we're not really getting anywhere with authenticity if we're citing who believes what, because it's a worldview debate.
This
If
is
I
a
go
book.
in, if
Listen,
I go in,
your yapathon is meaningless. This is a book written by an actual Christian scholar, Richard Bauckham. It's called Jesus and the Eyewitnesses. And even in this book, a conservative Christian scholar is going to tell you the same thing I said, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we don't have any original attribution. They're anonymous gospels. They're copying from Mark. Mark himself probably wasn't an eyewitness to anything. He was collecting other people's eyewitnesses and collecting them so that he can make his own account. We have no idea who Mark even was. We just think that maybe the gospel author, if he was Mark, was in fact John Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. This is from a Christian scholar, not an atheist scholar. And this is not a debate, within scholarship. I don't know who you're reading, but this is a nonsensical talking point. Now I got to unmute you.
no, yeah, again, great. Appreciate the mute, appreciate the unmute. Yeah, people read different books, greatly appreciated. I just don't understand, from my point of view, why this is this way based on this book I've read that supports this book I've read, other than research, which I 100% support and get, which is why we're here.
Well,
But
I've done the research.
Here you go. Hey, man, appreciate your yapathon. You've said the same thing you've said since your whole channel's been going. I don't understand any new points where you have proven anything.
You didn't ask me to prove anything yet. What do you want me to prove?
So
I could prove to you that Jesus is not the Messiah.
Okay.
Want to start
Please.
there?
Sure.
We'll start in Zechariah chapter 9. You got your Bible?
I'll make myself available. Sure. Zechariah
chapter 9. I'll put it on the screen for everyone watching. I'm going to be reading from the NRSV updated edition. We're going to go down to verse 9 and 10. According to Matthew chapter 21, this was done in order to fulfill the words of the prophet, riding on the donkey, obviously. Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Oh, sorry, I didn't put it on the YouTube screen. Sorry, here we go. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he. Humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem. And the battle bow will be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion will be from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. What part of that did Jesus actually do?
Sorry, I'm not being silent. I'm bringing it up so I can read it presently.
You don't have a Bible?
I'm bringing up the digital version of the version you have. Typically, I'm rooted in the...
Where'd he go? I think he just swiped away from the app and it cut him. He's not in... Oh, he's back. Hold on. I don't know what happened, but you're back now.
Yeah. Hey, brother. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, my bad. Yeah, usually I'm rooted in the King James version.
Why?
However, you were citing another version, so I was just trying to bring it up digitally.
King James is a dog shit translation.
I mean, I would argue that.
Do you know Greek and Hebrew?
No, I mean, do you?
Yeah. Probably
You
not
know
a,
Greek and
well,
you know Greek and Hebrew.
I used to know Greek. I know Hebrew though.
Okay,
I can
right.
still read
So
Greek.
hey, so I mean, this is even a great example. So I ask you a question, inherently you say yes,
Well, I
but
can read Greek.
not quite an honest answer.
No, it's not understanding.
How?
I can read Greek. I just need to rely on a dictionary because I forgot a lot of vocab.
Right. So I mean, that's
But
the
you
exact
don't.
same thing
But
I'm
you don't
doing.
know any Greek or Hebrew, do you?
Right. That's why
So
I
how would you know that the
rely.
King James Bible is a good translation?
Literally the same reason you just stated is so that I can rely on a dictionary or a translation. That's what you just said.
But I actually know the grammar. You have to know grammar to understand the language. You can't just look up a word and know what it means. You actually have to know how grammar works.
Right. That's why you look up Greek, Hebrew, the Strong's
Yeah.
Concordance.
They
You
won't teach you grammar.
cross-reference. This is when I would mute you for interrupting me.
No, go for it. Give it your best shot. Okay, so let's talk about Zechariah chapter 9. What part of this actually got fulfilled?
All right. Again, it's going to cut out for a moment while I look up your version.
Read it in any version you want. I don't care. What part of it got fulfilled?
So you started in 9, correct?
Yep.
All right. What about 9 in principle? I mean,
I'm
period.
asking you, what part of it got fulfilled? What part of Zechariah chapter 9 got fulfilled?
Your king comes to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Your king comes to you. Okay. So moving, someone's moving, righteous and victorious.
This your first time reading this?
Well, I'm reading it slow to us so we can discuss semantics, which you said don't even matter in an argument, right? Because the words are going to come into play here, right? So you said which part?
It was a yes or no question. Either you have or you haven't read it.
See. Can we see? Yes. Your king comes to you. All right. King is moving towards us. Righteous and victorious. Righteous. And then at this point, I'd ask you, what do you think righteous means?
I'm
And
asking you,
semantics don't matter.
what part of this actually got fulfilled? Because the only thing Jesus did, according to Matthew chapter 21, is he rode a double donkey. But this isn't about a random guy who rode a donkey. This is about an actual king who's going to be victorious in battle, and he's going to cut off all of Israel's enemies. Did Jesus do any of that?
No, where does it say he'll be victorious in battle?
It says, "See, your king comes to you, triumphant and victorious is he." And then how is
Okay.
he? How is he triumphant and victorious? Verse 10.
Okay.
He will cut off the
Triumphant.
chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be cut off.
Yeah, okay, correct. So righteous and victorious doesn't necessarily have a war connotation, right? You can be righteous and victorious.
The
I can
passage
be,
tells you what it means. Verse 10. Read it.
okay, I
Tell you
will
what,
take away.
Take 5 seconds and read it to yourself, and I'll read out this super chat while you're reading verse 10 for the very first time. Glycan, thank you for the $10 super chat. Glycan says you should have each caller either begin or end with the admission that their God is logically contradictory and explain them the three omnis. I love talking about the logical problems of the omni God. I don't know if we'll get there tonight, but we'll see what we can do. All right, you finished verse 10?
Brother, you're just so. I love your passion, I do, and I'm 100% on board with your goal and what you're trying to get. However,
I'm just trying to read the book.
I get you, but I mean, that's not intently true. That's not what you're just trying to do.
I'm reading it with you right now.
I know.
Did Jesus cut off the chariots from Ephraim?
Brother, you said, are they currently present?
I'm asking you, did he cut off the chariots from Ephraim?
Okay, and I'm asking you, are the chariots of Ephraim intact?
Chariots ceased to be used 1,000 years ago.
Okay, so what's wrong about this verse presently?
Jesus didn't do it.
Okay, can you prove that?
Can you prove that he did? You might as well say Mr. Potato Head did it.
Okay, I got you. Can you prove that he didn't? That's the same
Can
thing
you
you're
prove that the
asking me.
Tooth Fairy didn't do it?
Okay, exactly. Like
Okay, so
we're
something
we're
isn't
asking
true.
inarguable
Just
differences.
something isn't true just because you don't have evidence for it. Like if I said the tooth fairy cut off the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, it's not just true if you don't have evidence that it didn't happen. That's not how truth claims work. Also, Flanker,
Right.
thank you for the $5 super chat. Flanker says, read between the lines and ignore the lines themselves. That's always what happens. And GH, thank you for the $5 super chat. He loves your passion, the passion of Doug. I am filled with the passion of Doug. Okay. So the fact of the matter is Jesus didn't do any of this. Jesus came, he was executed by the Romans, then the Romans steamrolled the Israelites. The exact opposite of what this says is going to happen. Thank you for the hats, Rusty.
Yeah. So the statement about something, you said something not being true just because you don't believe it's true.
That's not what I said.
Yeah. No, I'm asking. I'm not saying that you said that. I'm asking what it was you said in particular. It really resonated with me.
Something isn't true by default just because you don't have evidence against it. If that were the case, then it would turn out that Santa Claus is real and the tooth fairy is real.
Something isn't true just because you don't have evidence that it's not true, right?
Yeah, because things that didn't happen don't have evidence. You see?
Right. Yeah. But isn't that your whole basis or foundation for not believing in God?
No, my whole foundation for not believing in God is that there's no evidence that God exists. Like my default position is when I believe in something, it's because there is evidence to believe in it. Also, iReactor, thank you for the super chat. That's not what faith is. So double think is using a large number of manuscripts as evidence, whereas most of these manuscripts were not yet discovered until the time of the KJV. I agree. Most of the manuscripts we actually have were discovered way after the KJV. So faith is believing in something without the evidence. I believe in things once we have the evidence.
That's what the definition of faith has always been?
No, that's what your definition of faith is according to the Bible.
No. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's what we just read it. Hebrews chapter 11. Were you with us when we read it?
I was.
Okay.
And you said
faith is the evidence of the unseen.
Evidence of the unseen. Okay,
Yeah.
so
is faith evidence?
Do rules of logic exist?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think that laws of logic are transcendental at all. Can you demonstrate that they are transcendental?
So laws of logic don't exist.
No, laws of logic are man-made descriptions for how things work.
So it would exist regardless of how men described it.
No, it wouldn't exist. The laws of logic don't exist. The laws of logic are descriptions that mankind made up. Rusty, thank you for the caps. I appreciate that. Just like the number one, just like the word faith.
This logically,
because it's a process. We are using.
So the process of logic exists.
We are using logic. We call it logic, and logic is the process that we're engaging in. Just like science is a process that we engage in. But science isn't a thing. Science isn't a metaphysical thing. It's not a transcendent thing that exists out there in the universe. Just like the word chair, there's no metaphysical chair floating around in the universe.
Right. So how do you know it exists?
How do you know what exists?
Science or logic?
It doesn't. I just told you. Science is a process that we engage in. There's a process.
The process of science doesn't exist?
There is a process that we engage in. And we call that behavior, we call that science. But so science itself...
something that exists that we call something.
Literally not what I said. I quite literally said science doesn't exist as an entity. It's not a thing. It's not a stuff. You can't touch it. Science is a description of what we do. Science is a description of a process that we engage in.
So it's not physical. It's something that we engage in, and it exists, but we just describe it.
Again, I just told you 5 times it doesn't exist. The laws of logic don't exist. Science doesn't exist. It is a description that we give to a process.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now I'm on board with you.
I don't know why this was so hard.
No, I got you. Now I'm with you. Now I'm on board with you, and I want to subscribe because logic doesn't exist, science doesn't exist, God doesn't exist. I'm fucking with you now.
Sounds like you're brain dead is what it sounds like.
No, I mean, I'm with you. The same way you describe how logic and science doesn't exist, but it's a process. That's
All right, we're going to move on to an actual adult. You can go somewhere else. He was so annoying, I almost sent a Pegasus just to get rid of him. Yeah, I guess does have a helmet. You're right, Annabelle. All right, Sifted Truth has been begging in the comments for an hour to come in. Here's your chance to show everyone how smart you are. I can't wait. For everyone watching over on YouTube, there is a link to join in the description of the video. You'll also find a link to join in the description of my profile. If you want to join the discussion, you can go ahead and click the link. You don't have to have an account with TikTok. You don't have to have an account with YouTube. You don't have to have an account with anything. All you got to do is click the link and join. It'll ask you what your name is, and then it'll ask you what microphone you want to use and what camera you want to use. And then you're in. Sifted Truth must have left. Apparently he got sifted. He didn't have any truth. The Holy Spirit was weak. If you come back later, you're welcome to drop yourself back into the queue. The next guest that's been waiting has been Santi's World. All right, we'll bring him in. Santi, welcome in.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so is it fair for me to start with me giving the description of what I believe God is or means, what God means?
Well, I think that is fair. You know, typically when we talk about whether or not your God exists, it's good to know which God you believe in. So I would love for you to describe your God.
Okay, so by God, what I understand from my belief, is the being that created everything that exists, that we live in, including ourselves, our thoughts, everything that we experience. That's what I call God. Is that something that you would go by?
Fair enough. So you don't believe in a particular God then?
Well, I believe in one God, the God of the Bible.
So you're a Christian. Cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
what would be
I don't call myself Christian, but I
do you follow Christ?
I believe in the scriptures.
Do you follow Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
So you're a Christian. Cool.
Okay.
So anyways, what would be the most compelling argument or the best evidence for why the Christian God is real?
So because it didn't on the title, it didn't specify. It just said, your God is imaginary.
Yeah, your
Prove
God.
me wrong, right?
Yeah, your God is
Right.
imaginary, and your God is a Christian God. So I want to know,
Okay.
what's the best evidence for your God?
So to me, Christ is not God. I just want to get that clear.
Big W. Yeah, he certainly can't be God without breaking
Okay.
all intelligibility.
Okay. So if Christ is not God, and I'm telling you that by God I mean the creator of everything,
So
and
Yahweh.
if you tell me that that's an imaginary thing, me pointing at what we experience would be a proof. Would that not be logical?
No.
No.
How
Okay.
do you get from existence to your God?
Because if that's what I give the definition for myself, what God is, and I point to and see that there is a creation, that would prove. If somebody said, "Where's the God you believe in?" I say, "He made all this," and I say, "He
But-
said, point at it."
But
And
how
I
do you
point
know?
at creation.
How do you know he made it?
Well, it might be in my imagination, but when it comes to reality, by giving you the evidence of the creation itself.
No. You'd have to demonstrate that it was created in the first place. I don't think that there was such a thing as a creation. In fact, I think that creation is an unintelligible term because you believe that your God is outside space and time, don't you?
Right. Something I can't comprehend myself, so I can't explain to you fully what that means.
Yeah, it's completely incomprehensible because in order to do anything, you need time to exist, right? In order to have a thought, even, you need time to exist because there's a moment in which you don't have the thought and then a moment at which you do have the thought. That requires time. If you're saying that your God is outside of time, that means every thought he's ever had and every action he's ever taken has either happened for zero amount of time or it's been happening forever all at the same time. Both of those are unintelligent.
well, unintelligent according to what our man, I'm kind of bad with words, so you're gonna beat me on some things, but according to what we know, right?
No, just according to, the way things work. Yolanda, thank you for the 666. Yolanda says, this guest, I might be referring to the current guest or the previous head, says, the guest so badly wants there to be a God. The God is in his head. That might be true. And I get that. I was agnostic for a long time after I deconverted from Christianity. It's hard to let go of that foundational belief, right? It's very difficult. But the fact of the matter is, time itself works in a particular way. So if God is outside of time, that means everything he's ever done has happened for zero amount of time, which means it didn't happen, or everything that he's done outside of time has always been happening for all of eternity. But we couldn't say that. We couldn't say that God creating the universe has always been happening for all of eternity, because then there would be an infinite number of universes. Do you understand? I don't know what happened to Santi. If he's Santi, I don't know what happened. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Am I still on? Hello.
Yeah, you're still on. For some reason, Streamlabs put you back in the queue. I don't know why it did that, but did you hear everything?
Yeah, I kind of heard that I really want to believe in that God, right? So I'm guessing, were you ever a believer, or you never believed in that?
Yeah, I was a believer for about 2 decades, and I even went to Bible college and seminary. It wasn't until I got mostly through seminary that I decided that the God of the Bible is just literally impossible. The Bible is hopelessly contradictory. It gets science and history wrong at every turn. The God of the Bible is a capricious maniac. He doesn't even know how female body works, which is weird since he created females. And the prophecies that Jesus supposedly fulfilled are just random out of context quotation from the Old Testament. When you look at the actual Messianic prophecies from the Old Testament, it's clear that he didn't do them. And then when you talk to Christians about it, they say, well, he'll do it when he comes back. But that doesn't mean anything to me, right? If you're telling me that he's going to do all of these prophecies when he come back, and the only thing that he actually did do was come and die, that doesn't mean anything to me. There's a number of Jewish messiahs that came and died. I could just plug in Simon Bar Kokhba. Simon Bar Kokhba was actually accepted by the Jewish people as a messiah for a period of 4 to 5 years before the Romans killed him. He actually led as a prince, as a king over the Israelites, which Jesus never did.
I mean, I can't dispute what you think that is, because that's your point of view, right? But you say God is an impossibility as just a Christian God, or just the notion of God itself is an impossibility?
The Christian God. No, I don't think that like a supreme being or a higher power, I don't think that is incoherent or logically impossible. I think it actually is logically possible. But I would say that in order to believe in something, just because it's logically possible doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. So, for example, it's logically possible that the universe was actually created by a series of magic pixies. Now, that might be logically possible, but that doesn't mean that it's likely to be true. You know what I mean?
No, I get you. So when you were a believer, what was the breaking... When you were a believer, what was the breaking point of you knowing that was an impossible God, the Christian God? What made it impossible? The main point.
Well, the main point for me was the Bible gets facts wrong. For example, it doesn't know why women bleed when they have sex for the first time. It bungles that. Deuteronomy 22 states that if a woman doesn't bleed on her sheet on her wedding night, then you can execute her. But only half of women actually bleed on the first time they do the deed, right? So God is willing to execute.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. If a woman what?
According to the law given in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses like 14 through 21, I believe, there is a law given that says if a woman doesn't bleed on her wedding night, and then her husband accuses her of not being a virgin because she didn't bleed, then she's going to be stoned for lying about her virginity. But only about half of women actually bleed their first time. That the female body just doesn't work that way. And at the time that Deuteronomy was written, it was written by a bunch of men who didn't actually know how the female body worked. And so they believed that that was the only proof that you needed. It wasn't until hundreds of years later that people got together and were like, that's not necessarily true. Sometimes the hymen breaks for other reasons, and sometimes it breaks and doesn't even bleed, right? So to me, like, if this book is from God, I would expect him to at least get female anatomy right.
Okay, so you're saying that the book of Deuteronomy is saying that God told them to do this?
Yeah. Yeah, all the laws in Deuteronomy are given by God. It says such in about 12 different positions in Deuteronomy. Moses says, "Be sure that you follow this law that the Lord your God is delivering to you today." And it says, "Do not add anything to it. Do not take anything away from it." And then he says on a number of occasions that you need to follow this law forever. He says every day that the Israelites live on the earth is a day that the law is in effect, which is another problem for the New Testament, because the New Testament can't be true if the words of Paul are true. Paul says in Galatians chapter 3 and elsewhere that the law was temporary, but everywhere we read about the law of the Old Testament, it is quite literally permanent and forever. And even Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 that not one jot or tittle will pass away from the law until heaven and earth pass away, and then whoever does them and teaches others to do them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven, and whoever teaches others to not do them will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, which is it's a huge problem for the writings of the New Testament when Paul disagrees with the actual Messiah.
I agree with you about maybe the laws in that time, and I'm guessing when you say laws, because if we go back to Moses, God only gave Moses 10 laws, right? This is what they cling on to, the book of Moses.
Hundreds of laws.
Of Moses.
Turn to Leviticus 25:1 for me. I'll put it on the screen for everybody. Have you read through Leviticus before?
I'm not a big Bible, thing, but I'll understand what you're saying if you read it to me.
Yeah. Leviticus 25:1 says, "The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land," and then he gives a bunch of laws that are recorded in chapter 25. And most of the chapters in Leviticus start out this way. Moses was on the foot of Mount Sinai, and God gave him the law. The same way it happened in the book of Exodus. God spoke to Moses as he was near the mountain and gave him a bunch of laws. And then the same thing in Deuteronomy. He's speaking in Deuteronomy prior to them entering into the promised land, and he's giving them the law a second time. So all the laws in the book of Deuteronomy and elsewhere are laws that God gave.
I can understand that, but which one came first, Moses, the laws of Moses, or by your understanding, which came first, the 10 Commandments, because it says God wrote them on stone himself, right, and then gave it to Moses? Is that what the story says?
Yeah, I mean, so there are technically 12 commandments initially, not 10, but there are some initial commandments that God gives when Moses was on the mountain for 40 days that were written in the stone. And then there are additional commandments, according to the book, that were given by God that were also written by stone. If you read the book of Deuteronomy, it says that the laws, and even in Exodus, says the laws were written on stone tablets and placed in the tabernacle next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay, you know Bible more than me, and I'm a quote unquote Christian. That's amazing, but because we could take this a whole long road, right? I don't want to make it long. I want to get people to talk. But my main purpose is: did you see the book, or do you still see this book as a way to prove something, or just a self-help book, basically?
Well,
I don't see the Bible as like a book of proof. You said faith, right? So.
Well, the problem with the Bible is if you take the Bible and say that like it's a metaphor, well, now the whole meaning of the book kind of becomes subjective. Like when you take a historical text and you say that it's a metaphor, the metaphor now is just kind of like whatever you want it to be, because metaphors are those types of things where the meaning is going to be different for everybody. But we've got lots of stuff in the text that would lead us to believe that it's not metaphorical. Like we've got genealogies, and even the genealogy of Jesus goes all the way back to Adam. So they believe that Adam was real. And Paul justifies the sacrifice of Jesus in Romans chapter 5 as being the second Adam. And then he's like 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and 2 Timothy records that women are basically subservient to men because of what happened in the garden, because women were created from the glory of man and man was created from the glory of God, and it was the woman who ate from the tree and sinned, and therefore it's the duty of the woman is to be subservient to the man. So Paul's rationalization for his teaching is derived from a literal reading of the Old Testament, and everybody else in the New Testament, their teachings are derived from a literal reading of the Old Testament. And even in Acts chapter 7, I believe, when Stephen is stoned, Stephen gives a literal history of the Old Testament, a truncated history, obviously, right before he was stoned. So, like, everything in the New Testament would lead us to believe that the authors of the book believe that the Old Testament was deadpan literal.
No, I didn't say it was a metaphor. I'm saying the book itself is not like a science book. It's not like a book where it's telling you, listen, I'm gonna show you God, how He created everything from start to finish. It wasn't a book to say everybody's a perfect person. Everybody's gonna do the same the things that I say. It's a book detailing what it's recording what happened throughout the generations, right? Since the beginning. That's what it really is. And if you know Bible, you know it has a purpose at the end of it. It's like a story. Well, it's detailing all the stuff that's happened that people did wrong. That even the people who claim to be, prophets or whatever, they did things that weren't good. They weren't the things that what God wanted. And this is why they were in the desert for 40 years, being disobedient to God, what God really wanted. And then at the end, you get a conclusion. It's just a story that depicts something that you take out of that has nothing to do with proving God in that way, but actually, to me, I see it as a self-help book, basically.
Yeah. Well, let me address that, but let me read out a super chat real quick before I forget. His Zotness, thank you for the $5 super chat, says justice for Aisha, hashtag. I agree, hashtag justice for Aisha. She got done dirty. Also, guys, we've got a number of members over on YouTube now. We do have some emojis for those who are members on YouTube, and we also have access to the deconstruction cheat sheet spreadsheet for the second tier members over on YouTube. So you can check that out if you so wish. I do love and appreciate everyone that supports me. When we say things like the book is not a science book, I'm not really suggesting that the book is a science book, right? But if the book makes claims about reality, we should be able to go back and say, okay, is that claim true? And so, like, when it says that, Jacob took a bunch of poplar stems, or not stems, branches, and then peeled the bark off of them so that they would be striped. And then he put them in front of the flocks as they mated. And then because the flocks mated in front of the striped poles, they produced striped offspring. Well, that may not be a scientific account of how mating works, but it's making a claim that something happened, and it gave the reason why it happened. And the reasoning is quite literally impossible. And the same thing with Genesis. Genesis says that the rivers were formed before there was ever rainfall. But the specific rivers that are listed weren't fed by underground rivers. They were quite literally fed by rainfall. We know this to be a fact. The rivers that are mentioned in Genesis all are a product of rainfall. So there's just like statements in the book that just aren't true, like rabbits and rock badgers chewing cud. They don't chew cud.
I'll tell you, the book is
Well, what happened to you?
on the book, but it's not, since we have a better technology, more science, we're going to know a little bit better of what they thought it was, right?
Well,
but the book itself is not giving you like a formula from beginning to end. It's just detailing everything that went on from the beginning until now.
No, I agree. I don't think that the book is trying to give you every amount of divine knowledge possible. It's giving you like the bare essentials, but when we read it, like, the bare essentials are saying things that are like demonstrably untrue. Like in Job 38:14, it says that the earth is formed like clay beneath a seal, but that's flat. Clay beneath a seal in the ancient world, if you've ever seen it, is a flat disc, which is what they thought the world looked like. And it says that there is a dome over top of the flat disc earth. Like, these are just...
There's still people that believe that today. So.
I know. So like when the book makes these claims about reality, then at some point we just have to say, hey, this book is saying things that are untrue.
Yeah, but just because a book says something, it's like you read a book, right? You're not going to agree 100% with everything somebody says, but you're going to take out what's good from it, right?
Right, but my question is not what's good. My question is about what's true. Also, thank you so much for the
True.
Jeff
Okay.
raid. I appreciate that, right?
So let's go to Christ, right? Christ is a whole different, another covenant according to Scripture, right?
Well, kind of, according to the New Testament, but not according to the Old Testament. Because if it's true that Christ did away with the law and the repercussions of the law, then we've got to deal with the new covenant as it's spoken about in Jeremiah 31 through 33. And the new covenant, as it's stated also in Ezekiel 36 and 37, the new covenant includes the laws of Moses. In fact, let me read Jeremiah 33 for you real quick. This is one of my favorite Old Testament passages because I think it's the most clear about what the expectation for the Messiah was and how Jesus just screwed the pooch. And not only that, you know, the theology laid out in the New Testament contradicts what God said was going to happen. So it says in Jeremiah 33:14, "The days are surely coming, says the Lord, when I will fulfill the promise that I made to the house of Israel and to the house of Judah." And we know what that is. Jeremiah already tells you prior what the promise is. The promise is that he's going to bring everybody back to the homeland. And it says, "In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he shall execute justice and righteousness in the land. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will live in safety. And this is the name by which it shall be called. The Lord is our righteousness." And this is the last part. Sorry, it's so long. "For thus saith the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. And the Levitical priests shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to make grain offerings, and to make sacrifices for all time." So when the Messiah comes, according to Jeremiah 33, the branch of David, there will be offerings and sacrifices forever, which is a direct contradiction of what the New Testament teaches.
Man, this is going to be a long story, but basically, when you read, let's go back forward to the New Covenant. Let's go back to Christ. He said he is the King of Kings, Lords of Lords, right? So if a president decides to veto everything, let's say in a governmental kind of way, although all the laws, the codes, the past administration had before, if a new president or a new king comes in, he's able to veto all that if he's given that authority, right?
Yeah, but God isn't vetoing anything. God is telling you this is what's going to happen. And then when he comes along, and in your worldview, he's coming along and doing the opposite, then God's just a liar. If we can't trust God's prophecies to be actual prophecies, if he can just change them willy-nilly, then why would we trust anything he says?
Do you think maybe because it's depicting about human beings, and you see that the Jews were really disobedient? They said they were disobedient for 40 years, right?
No, but
so when Jesus comes and says, "I am the Lord of the Sabbath," maybe they like the circumcision. It says, you know, Paul says the circumcision was never about, you know, the carnal part about, you know, cutting the thing off of the kid.
That's a contradiction too. That contradicts Ezekiel chapter 34 or chapter 44. So the problem,
I'm saying, it's a contradiction if it was true what the Jews said, but maybe the Jews didn't interpret what God was telling them the right way.
It's not the Jewish interpretation. It's just what the book says. Right? The book says, according to Ezekiel chapter 44, during the time when the prince finally comes and Israel is restored again, it says that all the people, all the foreigners who are not Israelites will join with the Israelites, and they will be circumcised of the heart and of the flesh. So according to the book of Ezekiel, when the Messiah comes, you're going to be circumcised in the flesh if you're a foreigner. But I don't want to get far away from Jeremiah. If the words of Jeremiah are meaningless, then there's no reason to believe anything in this book, because the proof that Jesus is the Messiah is that he fulfilled the prophecies. But if it turns out that the prophecies are meaningless, we can just say, well, someone can come along and claim to be God and then say all that stuff that demonstrated I am the Messiah, it doesn't mean anything. I'm just going to nullify all of it, and I'm going to do it because I'm God. That's a ridiculous claim, because I could do that. I can just say I'm the Messiah. Nothing in the Old Testament is ever going to come true because I'm nullifying it. It's just a ridiculous, unfalsifiable claim.
Once again, it's the interpretation, right? So maybe somebody like the Jews thought Jesus Christ was going to come as a king, and he was going to slaughter everybody. And
why did they
all of a sudden he came on a donkey, and Jesus said he was supposed to do everything that was written, right, in the book.
Right. And why did they
So
think he was coming
there's
as
a
a
scripture
king?
that says he had to be in a donkey because that's what was written about him.
Yeah, Zechariah chapter
So
9. You want to read it with me?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. This is according to Matthew 21. What
I'll let the guy go. I'll let Josh go. I'll let Josh go.
Who's Josh? I don't know who he's talking to. Okay, so according to Zechariah 9:9, this was fulfilled in Matthew 21. It says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he. Humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be cut off. And he'll command peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from the sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth." What part of this passage did Jesus fulfill?
The donkey part.
Okay, well, I rode a donkey. Am I the Messiah?
No, but you got to look at it. See, some things are literal and some things are metaphors.
Okay,
some
so
things happen and some things are for the future.
So the donkey part is literal, but cutting off the enemies from Ephraim and Jerusalem is metaphorical. Do you see how you see how your particular hermeneutic is just saying that the words
because
don't.
That just proves our interpretation, and not everybody's going to interpret the way.
No, I want to make a very poignant statement about your interpretation. Your interpretation is just words don't mean what words mean. You're suggesting when I like what they mean, it's literal. When I don't like what they mean, somehow it's figurative or metaphor, but that's not an appropriate way to deal with the text. You wouldn't let me do that. If I read a text and said, well, I fulfilled this prophecy, because in Isaiah 65:9, I believe, it says that I will bring forth descendants, and I've brought forth descendants. You wouldn't let me say that I fulfilled that prophecy, would you?
That wasn't me, by the way. That's not me. That's somebody else.
I don't hear anything. If there's noise in the background, I can't hear it.
Oh, okay, I got you. I'm listening to the other guys. My bad. So
I can't hear anybody else other than you. I don't know what's going on. If the other people in the queue are talking right now.
Yeah, they are.
Let me turn their volumes down and see if it goes away. Because none of them are actually on the stream. It must be that you can hear them and I can't. I turned their volumes down. I think that'll probably fix it. I can just mute them too if that's helpful. Actually, hold on. Sorry, I turned your volume down too. Let me fix this up. All right, so now their volume is down and your volume's up. Everything good?
No, that's fine. I can still hear, but that's fine. I'll go on. I'm not going to go too long because I don't want to take everybody's time. But basically, that's why I started saying the book to me is not a book of proof or facts. It's just a self-help book. So whatever I can get from it, that's good. And whatever evidence I can produce from that to prove to you that book helped me out, that could count as a kind of proof. If you tell me, listen, do you believe this God is real? What has he done for you? And I tell you, the book tells me if I love my brother and, forgive my enemies and all this stuff, and I practice these things, and it helps me, and you see the change in my life, wouldn't that be a proof kind of to a reality, not just an imagination? Even though it might be imaginary in my mind, it comes to reality when I put it to practice. Right?
Yeah, but it also says you can own slaves. Like there's horrible stuff in the book too.
You only focus on the bad things, though.
Well, you're only focusing on the good things. Why are you ignoring the bad things? Because
doesn't life have a lot of negative things without the Bible, with the Bible?
Well, the Bible shouldn't have negative things if it's from God, but the stuff that you like about it, you can find elsewhere. Like the teachings of Jesus are all duplicated basically in the Talmud. You can find almost all of the teachings of Jesus in the Talmud.
I get you, man. I get you. I don't want to take up your time. That's all I got to say, man. Thank you for having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It was good talking to you.
Yep.
All right, cheers. All right, we've got some people in the queue. 207 Real Estate has been waiting the longest, so we'll take 207, and then we'll move on to some people waiting on the YouTube queue. We've got some people waiting on YouTube queue and some people waiting on TikTok queue. Welcome in 207.
Hey, what's happening, man?
Not too much. How you doing?
I'm good. So actually, I just wanted to mention three things to you. First off, ex-church leader, ex-missionary, just recently deconstructing. You've played a pretty heavy role in that.
Yeah, big W.
So the work you're doing is valid, man.
I appreciate that. I really do.
What I'm definitely finding out is coming out of it and talking to people, especially from our old church and whatnot. I'm starting to slowly see that I think it's an IQ issue, and especially like listening to a lot of your callers in here too. I think it's an IQ issue. I really do.
And an education issue. You know, people aren't reading the book.
Right. And that's, I used to be a missionary. There's nothing I loved more than like going to college campuses and trying to spread the gospel. That's what I love to do.
Right.
So all I would do is memorize apologetics. I wouldn't actually read the text.
Right.
I just memorize apologetics.
That happens every time. That's why when I get apologists on here, I cook them every time because they don't actually know what's in the book.
Right. And then so one day I had this epiphany, hey, I should probably start reading the text instead of just memorize apologetics. And I was slowly appalled.
Me too.
My wife and I were part of a very tight-knit Bible study group, and we started bringing these questions up, and we were ostracized almost instantly. Yeah. It was pretty shocking to see from people who went from you are closer to me than blood family to you're no longer welcome here because you're asking blasphemous questions is what I was being told. So
I know. I'm sorry that happened to you. I was lucky that my family didn't shun me or anything. And I was in Bible college and seminary, so I had like educated people to ask my questions to, but it turns out their answers aren't any better than what you're going to get on the internet. They're just more advanced levels of coping.
Right. And so, yeah, it's been a crazy journey, but I appreciate the work you're doing. The last thing I just wanted to bring up was maybe another talking point that I was studying on that I wanted to maybe share with you, because I don't think I've heard you talk about this yet. But in Numbers 31, where the Israelites defeat the Midianites and God commands them
take the little girls.
Yeah, so God condones child slavery or commands it. So not only child slavery, but trafficking. So because you don't have to be a genius to put that together what the little girls are for. So
I know. And I don't get to talk about Numbers 31 often enough. Maybe I'll start doing that more often. I feel like so many people talk about it that I feel bad doing it myself. But I mean, my material is starting to get old, so I got to start moving around.
Hey, well, I'll let you go, man. Thanks for letting me on. Cheers.
Good to hear from you, 207. Big dubs for 207. Deconstructing is hard. It really is. Judas, thank you for the $10 super chat. Judas says, why do Christians only focus on Jesus as the true Messiah? Why not all the other claimants? Life of Brian is more accurate than Christians want it to be. Yeah, I know. I love the Life of Brian, by the way. But listen, if we're just taking supposed messiahs from history and we're saying that they fit the bill, I'm going with Simon Bar Kokhba every day of the week. He fit the bill of the Messiah much more than Jesus. So let's get Josh in here. Welcome in, Josh.
How's it going?
Good. How are you? I'm actually glad someone decided to turn their camera on. It's always good to talk to a face. Sorry on TikTok you can't see his face, guys.
Well, I did want to point out, so I know you went through a lot of different things, but one of them you did talk about Ezekiel, talking about the temple. When God is talking through Ezekiel about the temple, it's not about the temple that's supposed to come. That's actually talking about what they're doing at the time of the temple that they have, and that God is telling them what they were doing was abominations. It's not a contradiction that later on God's going to allow that, but he's saying at the time for the law that they gave them, they were allowing foreigners who were uncircumcised in heart and in flesh in his sanctuary, defiling it.
Right. And when was Ezekiel written?
It was...
I'm going to test you.
I think it was during the time of Babylon.
Yeah, he was near the river when it first started getting written, and he was in the Babylonian exile, and he was prophesying what's going to happen after they return from Babylon, and it included the restoration of Israel and a restored temple. That's why we have Ezekiel chapter 37, the Valley of the Dry Bones, coming to life, and then we've got actual measurements, I believe, starting in chapter 40 or 41. Let me grab it. I've got my Bible on me. Yeah, in the 25th year, chapter 40, in the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, on the 14th year after the city was struck down, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was upon me and brought me there. And he brought me in visions of God to the land of Israel. And he set me down on a very high mountain. And then he goes through and he gives measurements for the new temple. This is how you're going to lay it out. Here's how big it's going to be. Here's where the doors are going to be. Here's where the various tribes of Israel are going to be situated in the land again. And here's what's going to happen. The Messiah, the Prince Nagid, he's going to come and he's going to lead all of the Israelites into repentance. And they're going to give offerings and sacrifices again, just like the law of Moses had it. And he tells them which animals they're going to sacrifice, when they're going to sacrifice them, and how the non-Jewish people are going to participate in it. So all of this was something that was supposed to happen after Ezekiel.
Yes, that's going to happen when Jesus comes back a second time, and he's in Jerusalem, and then the nations of the world will go to Jerusalem, and
then they'll need to be circumcised
there.
So, but you understand if you take Ezekiel and you kick the can down the road and say that this is talking about the second coming, then you've got a big problem, because then you've nullified all of Paul's theology. Paul says that the law was temporary and that you won't need it when Jesus comes back. And then that means there are no sacrifices, no circumcision. Nobody cares about that.
Well, the sacrifices for sins, yeah. Even after the disciples became apostles and Jesus rose, Paul himself also went to the temple and continued to do those, I guess you'd call them rituals. But it's not that he was doing them to be saved or to pretty much keep the law. It was a tradition. Like when he says that he's everything to all people. So for the Jewish people, like instead of what do you call it? He makes himself like them and participates with them, but also gives them the gospel. Like, hey, Jesus actually fulfilled all this. But then when they go to the Gentiles, they tell them you don't have to do this because it's all fulfilled in Christ. And then
I don't think that addresses my point, my man. My point is that if these offerings and sacrifices, as described in the book of Ezekiel, are referring to the second coming, then it nullifies the work of Jesus on the cross.
Well, it's not replacing what Jesus did. It's just they still could be symbolisms of what everything that Jesus did.
So they're going to slaughter all the animals just as a symbol of things to come?
Well, they still do offer, not all the sacrifices were sin offerings. Like some of them were offerings to God as gifts. So there's the specific sin offering that was done every year for the nation. And then I think there were offerings.
We know about the offerings, but that's still not my point. My point is, if the offerings are going to come back according to the law of Moses, including the sin offering in Leviticus chapter 5, then it nullifies what Jesus did. If Jesus came and he died to put an end to the animal sacrifices, as it says in Hebrews chapter 7, then we shouldn't see the animal sacrifices returning in Ezekiel.
Well, it doesn't say that the offerings that they're giving at that time are dealing with their sin.
Yeah, it does. It literally says that, yes, there would be sin offerings in Ezekiel. Want me to bring them up?
Well, yeah, in the gateway were 2 tables on this side and 2 tables on that side, on which they slay the burnt offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering.
Yep.
At the outer side, as well, goes up to the entrance, north gate. Yeah, well, I don't know. This is something that I have read also, and I found very interesting, talking about sacrifices again during that second coming. So, but I don't think it's...
But there's no second coming in Ezekiel. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't say the Messiah is going to come, and then he's going to die, and he's going to come back later. It says that the prince is going to arrive. He's going to reunite the north and the south. He's going to rescue all the people, bring them back to the land, and then they'll go back to doing the law of Moses as they were before. Ezekiel 36 and 37 details it pretty clearly. Doesn't say he's going to die and come back.
Yeah, so I don't think it's contradicting what Jesus already does, though. Like if they were to go back, because they're Jewish, like the Jewish people are doing that. So,
Right. Let me try this again. Also, Kim, thank you for the $2 super chat. Kim says the guest is showing on TikTok, but the guest box is blocking them. Yeah, I think I've got them moved over now. I think you should be able to see the guest. Okay, but you're still missing my point. If the offerings and sacrifices, the sin offerings, etc., the circumcision, everything, if all of that is talking about the second coming of Jesus, then it nullifies the entire book of Hebrews and almost all of Paul's teaching. Paul says that the law is done, that there is no need for the sacrifices anymore. So you can't have them coming back.
well, yeah, there's no need for them because Christ fulfills it. But
Okay, so then you can't say that Ezekiel is talking about offerings and sacrifices at the second coming. Ezekiel just contradicts the New Testament theology. It's as clear as day. And so does Jeremiah. Jeremiah 33 clearly says that when the Messiah comes, the branch of David, that there will be burnt offerings, grain offerings, and sacrifices forever, for all time. So you can't tell me that these don't contradict New Testament theology. That's one of the reasons why I know that the New Testament cannot be a logical extension of the Old Testament.
Well, I guess it all depends, because when Jesus does come the second time, he'll be reigning for 1,000 years, and sin and death aren't done away with. Like there's still going to be people who will live, and then after 1,000 years, Satan will be released. So there's still things that are going on. It's not until everyone's cast into the lake of fire, then there'll be the new Jerusalem that comes, and then God's going to wipe away every tear and everything like that. So like, because Jesus is going to come and he's going to also slay all those who choose to rebel against him. So there's still death and there's still things like that. And it's only those who go into the rapture and come back with Christ at the second coming who are going to reign with him. And then there's going to be people
that doesn't
who are
address
left on
anything
the
we're talking about. That doesn't address why there's going to be offerings and sacrifices again. If Jesus comes back and there are sin offerings and sacrifices again, then Jesus died for nothing.
No, Jesus still completed everything where like ultimately he fulfills everything. But just like I said,
fulfills what? Everything is meaningless to me. What did he fulfill?
He fulfills the whole law.
How?
The whole law. Well, everything is symbolic of what Christ came and did. So if
what's
you look
symbolic? You keep saying blanket words that mean nothing. You can't say everything is symbolic. Be specific. What's symbolic?
So if you look at like the Passover feast, right?
What about
it's all symbolic of Christ. So
no, it's not.
just how God told the Israelites to take the lamb, to slay the lamb, and then put it on the doorpost. And when the death angel comes, he'll pass over the house. It's the same way how, because Christ.
Do we still die?
Well, yeah, we still die right now.
Well, that's meaningless then. Okay, so if we still die,
then
the Passover lamb imagery is meaningless. So it's also true that according to the book of Exodus chapter 12, that Jesus, if he's the Passover lamb, needs to be dead too. The Passover lamb doesn't come back to life. It's a bad imagery. Do you think the Passover lamb came back to life every year?
No, but it was all...
Well, he's not the Passover lamb until he's been sacrificed and dead.
Yeah, so just how... Because the Bible talks about a second death, like being thrown into the lake of fire. So all those who have their faith in Christ because of the blood of Christ, just like how the blood of the lamb, the death angel like passes over them. Also, death passes over us because we live because of the blood.
No, we die. Lamb. We still, all of us die just like the lamb does. The only difference is you believe we have souls and the lamb doesn't. So again, but imagery is also meaningless to me. Imagery is not prophecy. Like I could go to the Old Testament, and I do this often. For example, when the Christians came over from Europe and we genocided the Native Americans and we called it manifest destiny, we can just say, well, this is the typological fulfillment of the conquest. And what would stop us from doing that?
Well, I guess I don't know, but like I wouldn't say those people who did that.
If you can just say that anything that is relatively similar to something in the Old Testament is now a typological prophecy, then, oh, buddy, I've got a whole list for you. I've got a whole list of prophecies that I fulfilled. Daniel Silva, thank you for the $2 Canadian super chat. Says, according to him, Jesus was Italian and from Jersey. I think he might be. So, but this is my problem, is we have very clear prophecies about the Messiah. And every time I read one, you're going to tell me, oh, that's for later. That's for when he comes back. And then when I ask you, well, tell me what he actually did fulfill, you can't point to one prophecy he actually fulfilled. And I have been doing this for a very long time. I know every prophecy about Jesus from the New Testament, and none of them are actual prophecies. And before you answer, Aaron, thank you for the $20 super chat. Aaron says, for any 5 Christian guests who disagree with Justin, I will send them a brand new NRSV UE Bible if they commit to reading it critically and not favorably. And I love that. If you don't know, Philodragon, known as Aaron, has an abundance of extra Bibles. He's loving he wants to give them out to Christians. So get a hold of Aaron Leitz on YouTube or Philodragon on TikTok if you want to get yourself a free Bible. Sorry for the advertisement. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't a prophecy. That was just something that you can look at and see, like, because Paul and everyone else, they use the Old Testament to show Christ. So, like,
okay,
I wouldn't say the how those that are symbolic, that's a prophecy. I'm because like they had the law and all that. So Jesus says, I'm going to fulfill the law, and they show it by how he fulfills it, just like that same way. That's why he's called the perfect Lamb of God.
Okay, so how do you know it's Jesus and not Simon Bar Kokhba?
Well, the Bible also explains like how that guy, when he had a group, and when he died, everyone dispersed, and it just eventually died off. And then the Jewish leaders say, if this is of God, then it will continue.
If it's not in the Bible,
and if it's not, yeah, it's in the Book of Acts.
Oh, yeah. You mean when they're talking about what to do with Jesus?
Well, they talk about this whole movement. They say that if this is of God, then who can stop it? But if it's not, then it will die off.
Not about Simon, though. Yeah, there was no conversation said about Simon. Okay, so, but that's meaningless.
I'll give
Simon Bar Kokhba and Jesus fulfilled the same number of prophecies, which is actually maybe not true. Maybe Simon fulfilled more than them. Simon was actually a prince. He was actually a leader over Israel. Jesus was not. Micah chapter 5, Zechariah chapter 9, Jeremiah chapter 33 demand that the Messiah is an actual king from the line of David.
Well, Jesus is going to be the king.
But he's not.
He's already. No, he is.
He's not. Show me in the Bible where he was ever a king.
He says his kingdom is not of this earth.
Well, I would say the same thing if I was not a king. If I was a bullshit king and I was never crowned king over my people, I'd say, oh, my kingdom's not of this world. That's a meaningless, unfalsifiable claim. It doesn't say that the Messiah is going to be king of an invisible universe in the sky. It says the Messiah is going to be a ruler in Israel. Defeat Israel's actual enemies.
That's going to happen in the second coming.
Well, it's not. I have no reason to believe that. If he wasn't king when he first came, I have zero reason to believe he's going to be king when he comes back.
Well, that's why the Jewish people believe that there were going to be two messiahs, one that was going to suffer and one who was going to conquer. They did. No. It talks about, I don't know, it might talk about it in the Talmud. That was something that they talked about.
It's in Sanhedrin. If you go to chapters like 82 all the way to like 89, you've got a bunch of predictions on what they think the Messiah or the multiple Messiahs will and won't do. The two Messiah theory, Messiah ben Joseph and the Messiah ben David, are indeed two different Messiahs, but they're only one of multiple different theories as to what they thought the Messiah could, would, or might appear as. So that's a meaningless assertion to me. So the Talmud posits a number of messiahs. It doesn't support one Messiah dying and coming back thousands of years later. It just doesn't. Now, the problem is you can't demonstrate a single prophecy from the Bible that says the Messiah is going to come, he's going to die, then he's going to come back. Every prophecy that's actually about the Messiah just says he's going to come and he's going to do shit. And Jesus came and he didn't do anything.
Well, there actually is a prophecy in Isaiah that talks about, I think it is 53.
It's not. That's about the nation of Israel.
No, it's about Christ. It's about how Christ is going to suffer for the sins of the world.
Show me in Isaiah 53 where it says the Messiah.
Because, well, in Isaiah 52, God talks about his chosen servant. So actually, let me go to 52, and then we don't have to read of all 53, but if you want, we can.
I don't think you've actually read Isaiah, have you? Have you only read parts of Isaiah, or have you read all of Isaiah?
I've read it. Okay. I haven't memorized all of it. But
are you aware that Isaiah tells you who the servant is on like 9 different occasions?
Yeah, that is God himself.
No, that it's the nation of Israel. Isaiah 41, 8 through 9. Do you have your Bible with you?
Well, let me read this.
Nope, you're not going to do it. 52. I'm not letting you skip over the context. We're going to read the context
but
before
this is something that I already brought up first.
You're going to read the context first. You guys are the kings of context. You're the ones that always say, I'm taking out of context. I'm not letting you skip the context. Leading up to chapter 53, the servant is identified at least 8 times.
All right. Well, all right. So we'll get back to 50.
I'll just read it for you.
What is it? Isaiah what?
Go to Isaiah 41, 8 through 9.
41, 8 through 9.
Read it out loud for everyone.
But you, Israel, O my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the descendants of Abraham, my friend, you whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest regions, and said to you, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not cast you away. Fear not, I am with you. But be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you.
That's all you need to read. So in that passage, who's the servant?
Jacob.
Great. Israel. Go to Isaiah 43:10 now. Go ahead and read Isaiah 43:10 for us.
All right, 43. You are my witness, says the Lord, my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me and understand that I am he.
Right, that's good. Okay, so here there are witnesses, plural, that are called the servant, right?
Yes.
Or my servant. Okay, so we're talking about the nation of Israel. The servant is a plural. Go to Isaiah 44, 1 through 2 now. Yeah, that's right, Daniel Silva. Thank you for the super chat. He says, Jews who believe in 2 messiahs are called Christians. Yeah, you're right.
44 what?
44, 1 through 2.
Yet hear me now, O Jacob, my servant, and Israel, whom I have chosen.
Yeah, who's the servant here?
Still talking about Jacob.
Right, yeah. And Isaiah 44, 21.
Remember these, O Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I have formed you. You are my servant.
Fantastic. So who's the servant here?
That is Jacob.
Right. You'll go to 45, 4 now.
For Jacob my servant's sake, and Israel my elect, I have called you by your name. I have named you, though you have not known me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Right. There is no God besides me.
All right, so who's the servant here?
That is also Jacob that he's referring to.
All right, now let's do the last one. Well, there's more, but we don't have to do all of them. Isaiah 48, 20.
Go forth from Babylon, flee from the Chaldeans, with a voice of singing, declare, proclaim, utter in the ends of the earth, says the Lord, has redeemed his servant Jacob.
Right. Servant here again is the nation of Israel. So
I don't deny that. I do believe that Isaiah, like God does call Israel his servant, but when you read it, he also says that he has his own chosen servant who's going to come and deliver Israel. So like it talks about a completely different other servant.
Did Jesus deliver Israel?
He did. He delivered them from their sin.
He didn't. He didn't deliver Israel from anything. The prophets say that he's going to deliver them from their enemies. That even Luke chapter 1 quotes it. Luke chapter 1 says that Jesus was born to fulfill what was written through the mouth of the prophets of old, that he would deliver us from the hands of our enemies and all those who hate us. That's a physical deliverance, not a deliverance from sin. There's no prophecy in the Old Testament about being delivered from sin, not even close. So in Isaiah 50, chapter 40 all the way to 55, this is what we refer to as second Isaiah. This is written by a prophet who identifies the nation of Israel as the servant on many occasions. And there's an arc. The arc in second Isaiah is that God's delivering his people from Babylon. That's why chapter 40 literally starts out letting them know that their time has been spent. Their penalty has been paid. They're done. They don't have to be in Babylon any longer. In fact, not only were they there to pay for their sins, but they were given double for their sins. They paid for their sins and for the sins of the nation, according to second Isaiah. So when I get to Isaiah 53, I have zero reason to believe that the servant is anybody but Israel. Why would I ignore the context of second Isaiah and insert somebody other than Israel here?
Well, yeah, let me go to Isaiah 53. 52 does talk about the sin-bearing servant, and Israel doesn't bear anybody's sins. They actually bear.
So if you read all of Isaiah, you would have seen where the nation of Israel was chastised for the benefit of the nations, because the nations, through the chastisement of Israel, will come to see that Yahweh is the one true God.
All right, so let me say this. So let me show you this. This is Isaiah 53.
How about we'll just read it all together, and I'll teach you how to read it properly.
Well, yeah, let me read it, all right?
Well, we'll start in 52. So if you go down to 52:10, we've got the beginning of the prophecy that we're actually concerned about. It says, "The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God." What does it mean that God has bared his holy arm? If you read Isaiah, you'd know what it means.
Well, like bearing his holy arm, it's like the
It's very simple. Isaiah mentions it like 15 times.
Well, Jesus is referred to as the right hand of God. So
that's not an answer to my question. What does Isaiah say about the arm or the hand of the Lord?
I don't know. I guess that his right arm has delivered them.
Delivered who?
Israel.
From what?
Well, yeah. So the Lord has made bare his holy arm in the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God.
Right, but elsewhere in Isaiah, what does he say he's doing when he bears his mighty arm? Have you read the rest of Isaiah? Because I'm feeling that you haven't.
I don't know. Well, he's going to make known the salvation to the whole world. So it says that
that's not what it says in Isaiah. You're making stuff up. I'll put it on the screen and I'll read it to you. Thank you so much, Daniel Silva, for the super chat. Daniel says, caller, Jews don't believe a man can be God, and neither do the Muslims, actually. And Daniel also says, Daniel 5:5, that his finger can appear and write. Yeah, God has a finger, according to Daniel, which is wild. Okay, this is Isaiah, and this is going to be 48:14. Assemble, all of you, and hear, who among them has declared these things? The one the Lord loves shall perform his purpose against Babylon, and his arm shall be against the Chaldeans. We know exactly what the arm of the Lord is doing in 2nd Isaiah. It's delivering the people of Israel from Babylon. Do you follow?
Yeah, when it's like God doesn't have a right arm either, but it's a reference to what God is going to do. So like
I'm
when
not.
it says like
I'm not
God's
saying
arm is
he
against somebody.
I'm not saying he has an arm. I'm just saying that according to the text, the meaning of God's arm being laid bare is to rescue the Israelites from captivity.
Yes, but it was ultimately from sin and death.
No, it doesn't say
That's
that in
what-
text anywhere.
Well, if you read, so if you go to the end of 52, it talks about a servant who's going to bear the sins, and he's going to do a sprinkling on all the nations.
We're going to read all of it, but you can't find me a single passage in Isaiah where the bearing of God's arm has anything to do with anything other than rescuing Israel.
Well, because the salvation is for the Jews, but it was also for the rest of the world. That's why
the salvation is from Babylon. That's why we just read in chapter 48, God says, flee from Chaldea. The whole arc of 2nd Isaiah is that it's time to leave Babylon. That's the context of the passage. Everything in 2nd Isaiah is about leaving Babylon. Everything. And you would know that if you read it. All right, we'll just keep reading. Let me put it back up on the screen for everyone. Actually, sorry, I'm reading it off my notes. It never was on the screen. I apologize. Okay, so chapter 52, verse 10 is very clear. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our gods. That's God bearing his arm against Babylon. And it says, depart, depart, go out from there, touch no unclean thing. Where are they departing from?
From Babylon.
Thank you, because this is about Babylon. Yeah, it says, go out from the midst of it and purify yourselves, you who carry the vessels of the Lord, for you shall not go out in haste, and you shall not go out in flight. For the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. And then it says, see, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up. He shall be very high, which is what is said elsewhere in Isaiah about the nation of Israel. If you read,
Well, look at this. Look at this.
If you read,
look at 52.
I know you're really excited, but we're not there yet.
No, you just read.
I know you're really excited, but we're still in verse 13. You gotta wait.
Yeah,
you gotta wait.
Yeah, look.
You gotta wait.
Go.
I'm just gonna mute you, so no one can hear you. Okay. Verse 13 says, my servant shall prosper. He shall be exalted and lifted up. He shall be very high. Thank you for the hat. I appreciate that. Elsewhere in Isaiah, God says over and over again that I will exalt you. I will exalt you over the nations. It says in chapter 56 that the nations will see that I have vindicated you and they will run to you. Nations that do not know you will run to you. And he says in 59 that the kings of the nations will bring their wealth to you. This is what's being talking about in Isaiah. Isaiah is talking about the restoration of Israel.
Well, let's read the next verse that comes after that. So
I can't wait. So we'll read verse 14 because that comes after verse 13. Easy enough.
It says,
before
my servant.
I don't know why you keep reading it. I'm going to read it in my version. It's just K. Thank you for the $10 super chat. It says, God is up on his throne saying, fuck hell, none of my followers actually read my book. I spent a long time on that damn thing. And Daniel says, dude, if you want to be free from sin and eternal life, be a good person and have a family. I agree. That's really all you need. Verse 14 and 15, let's read it. Just as there were many who were astonished at you, so marred was his appearance beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of mortals. So he shall startle many nations, and kings shall shut their mouths for them. Are you aware that
It says at 14.
Are you
it says,
aware?
Just as many were astonished at you.
Are you aware that this is talked about in the rest of Isaiah?
Yeah, and it talks about the sin-bearing servant. But look,
it doesn't.
He talks about, all right, so Israel he calls his servant, and then he's now talking about a different servant. He says, behold, my servant shall deal prudently, he shall be exalted.
He's not talking about a different servant. You just don't understand the context yet. So just
read it. It says it right there.
I promise we're going to read it. Listen, we're going to read all of it. We're going to read all. I'm going to mute you. We are going to read all of it. You don't have to keep skipping ahead. Every single word of this prophecy we're going to read. But what I'm not going to do is let you keep skipping ahead. We're going to do it one verse at a time, and you can cry all you want about it, but you're not skipping ahead on me. Okay. Now I'm going to unmute
I'm
you.
reading the same verse you just read. I'm just going back and showing you that it says it right there.
All right, so we're in verse 14. Why is this not about Israel?
Because it says, if you look at 13, he talks about his servant. So yes, obviously God does call Israel his servant. And now he's talking about a different servant. And he says,
how do you know?
Servant. Well, because he gives more context in 53 and on. And
No,
but look,
in verse 14 and 15, how do you know it's a different servant?
Because he says, just as many were astonished at you, because he's talking towards Israel.
And your translation says you, doesn't it?
I can go to, well, what translation are you
no,
using?
that's what it should say. I'm asking you, does yours say you? Because not all of them do.
Yes, mine says you.
Yeah, are you aware that you is plural? The Hebrew word there, atah, it's in the plural.
Well, I don't have the Hebrew on me right now, but yes, you in the Hebrew.
Actually, it's
also in English. It can also mean plural too. But
no, it's plural. It's plural in the actual Hebrew text. Elikha, which means upon you or according to you.
Well, that still sticks with it, because if he's saying just as many were astonished at you, so Israel is many.
Yeah.
He says just as many were astonished at you, so his, which is singular.
Yep.
Visage was marred more than any man.
So
and his form more than the sons of men. But
so
it's still single.
Yeah, I know.
So
so it is in the other references of the servant. It says, "You, O Jacob and Israel, are my servant. You're my witnesses, plural, and my servant." The servant is a collective noun for the nation of Israel, and it includes plural. It includes the nation of Israel. So you can't tell me that it's talking about a singular servant here just because it says servant in the singular, because it does elsewhere. In the previous passages where it says that Israel is a servant, it says servant in the singular, even though Israel and Jacob and the people are in the plural.
So, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. So
it does make it does make sense because it's a collective noun.
No, because that if you read it, he's saying, "Behold, my servant." But if he's talking about Israel, how can he be talking about Israel and then telling Israel again that they were astonished at Israel, just like how they were astonished at Israel?
Who's astonished?
The nation of Israel is astonished.
No, the nation of Israel is not astonished. It doesn't say the nation of Israel. It says just as they were astonished. Who
at
were they?
You. Well, like he's talking to the nation of Israel.
Yes, the nations are astonished at Israel. Why are the nations astonished at Israel?
Because of my servant.
Because of the rescue. It says just as there were many who were astonished at you. And why were they astonished? Where'd he go? Did he just cut out? I think he accidentally cut out. I don't think he meant to do that. He moved and he cut out. I think he's back. Let's see if we can get him in. Welcome back.
Oh, I didn't know I left. But
I don't know what happened. You moved and your phone cut out.
So
okay, so the fact of the matter is, everything in this is about the nation of Israel. You can't tell me that it's not. The whole context is about the nation of Israel. Isaiah 62, verse 2 and 4. The nations shall see your vindication and all the kings your glory. It's a glorification of Israel. Micah 7:16. The nations shall see and be ashamed of their might. They shall put their hands over their mouths and they'll be deaf when they witness what happens with Israel.
Yeah, right. So if you look at because of like we all have chapters and verses, but it used to never be like that. It used to just flow. So if you look at the end of 52, it goes and continues into 53.
I know. Yeah, it's one unit.
And it says, Isaiah says, "Who has believed that report?"
I don't know why you skipped over verse 15. Why do you keep skipping? Why do you not have Holy Spirit patience to read the whole text? All right, we're going to read the whole text. Isaiah 52:15 says, "He will startle many nations, and kings will shut their mouths because of him. For that which had not been told to them, they shall see. And that which they had not heard, they shall contemplate." This is the nations. Yeah. He's saying the nations who haven't seen and they haven't heard what God is doing, they're going to witness it and they're going to contemplate it, right?
Yes, which is true. Yes.
And then guess what? The very next verse is the nations witnessing and contemplating it. It says, who has believed what we have heard? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? Well, we already know the arm of the Lord has been revealed to the nations. It says, for he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look upon him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. The root out of dry ground is the nation of Israel. The prophet Isaiah tells you that in verse 60:21. Your people shall all be righteous. They shall possess the land forever. They are the shoot that I planted, the work of my hands. So again, everything in here is about the nation of Israel. There's not a single part of Isaiah 52, 53, 54, 55 that isn't about the nation of Israel. And let me tell you something else. If you think this is about a dying Messiah, you've got a big problem, because it contradicts every prophecy about the Messiah, every single one. But if you interpret it as the nation of Israel, funny, it matches every single prophecy about the nation of Israel. It agrees with everything in the Old Testament.
Well, no, there's many different verses that talk about different prophecies that talk about a dying Messiah.
Not one.
Was it Psalm 22?
Psalm 21 is not a. Psalm 22 is not even a prophecy.
Well, the Jewish people considered it Messianic.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
No, they did not.
I'm being dead serious. They did.
I know you think you're being serious, but you're lying, because the Jewish people.
I'm not lying.
Do you know what a Peser is?
I do not.
There's a subsect of Judaism that practice Peser, and this is where you take the prophecies and the words of the Old Testament, the law and everything, and you just say, actually, there's hidden meanings in here, and then you reinterpret it using those hidden meanings. And during the time that Peser was happening, they turned a lot of things in the prophecies that weren't actually prophecies, and 9 out of 10 of them were nowhere close to anything happening. All those predictions fail. And the New Testament authors are doing the same thing with the Old Testament. They're using Old Testament passages out of context and just calling it a prophecy. But Psalm 22 is not a prophecy. Psalm 22 is a lament of David. And even if there was a subset of Judaism that thought they can turn anything into a prophecy, I would disagree with them too. A prophecy is quite clear. It's a word delivered by God through a prophet that is actually telling you what to expect or what to look for, or a prediction for the future. That's Deuteronomy 18.
But let's take Psalm 22 for example. Nothing that David writes about has anything to do with his own life.
No,
that's why
everything in Psalm 22 is about David's life. I'll put it on the screen so that you can't lie to the audience.
I'm not lying.
You are. You're repeating really bad talking points that we've heard 5,000 times, and I've debunked 4 million times probably, and you're going to be a 4,000,001. So it says, to the leader, according to the deer of the dawn, a psalm of David. My God, why have you forsaken me? Who's my God, who's speaking here?
David.
David, okay. So David is speaking. That's the outset of the psalm, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. It says, why are you so far from helping me? The words of my groaning, oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer, and by night but find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. Okay, this is still about David talking, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the part that you want to read is about in verse 16 and 17. But we'll start in 12. David's still talking about his struggles. He says, many bulls encircle me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths like a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. Is this a prophecy or is this David lamenting?
Well, nothing like that even happens in David's life. But
yes, it did. Have you bothered to read 1st and 2nd Samuel?
But if you read...
Yes, it did. Have you bothered to read 1st and 2nd Samuel?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what happened to David when he was on the run?
Yeah, Saul was chased though, but they didn't
No,
pierce his hands and his
not just
feet.
Saul. He was also on the run from his own son when he usurped the kingdom. He was also on the run from Saul, and then he was on the run at certain points when he was warring for the Philistines, when he was holed up in Ziklag. He spent like half of his life basically in military battles, and guess what? He didn't win every single one of them. So it says, I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. This is clearly the prophet, I'm not the prophet, the king, speaking about his present struggles using metaphors, just like he is in the prior verse. Many bulls encircle me. Literal bulls aren't encircling King David. He's referring to his enemies.
This is a different topic to get into, but when David talks about how they pierce his hands and his feet,
Didn't say pierce.
It does.
It doesn't. Do you know Hebrew?
Yeah, even if you look at the Hebrew, yeah, there's a debate depending on whether if it says like a lion or whatever.
Yeah.
But like,
and why is that debate being had? Because it says, for dogs are all around me, a company of evildoers encircle me. They bound my hands and my feet. That's what the NRSV says. Yours says pierced. What word is actually in the Hebrew text? Do you know what it is?
I don't know. I forget what the word, but the reason why there's a debate is because
what's the Hebrew word for pierce?
I forget. I don't know.
It's dakar, and you'll find it elsewhere in the Old Testament to mean pierce. In fact, it's used in Zechariah chapter 12. You know what word doesn't appear in Psalm 22? The word for pierce. The word that we have there is ka'ari in the Masoretic text. Do you know what that means?
Well, this is the New King James, so they translate it to pierce, but the word that you're talking about that's original of why there's a debate between a lion and I forget something else, like it's because there's a letter difference. There's one letter difference, so people there is, yeah, it's one letter difference of why they debated that. But even
you're
if
wrong.
you debate,
I'll just put it on the screen so everyone can see that you're lying. Hold on.
Even if you translate it as I was bit like a lion on my hands and my feet. That like
it doesn't say bite.
Well, when it's translated, because it's translated obviously whatever it is, like lion or the other one, like.
All right, so just stop talking. You're embarrassing yourself. Let me just tell you what's actually happening here. So the word that we have in the Masoretic text is ka'ari. Do you know what ka'ari means?
No, I don't know Hebrew.
It means like a lion. Okay. Now, do you know what it says in the Greek text?
There's two. There's one that's like a lion, and the other one that's like it eventually gets translated into pierced.
I've got it on the screen for everyone to learn. So in the actual Masoretic text, it says ka'ari, which means like a lion, which is why most of the Bibles that are translated honestly will just say like a lion. In the Aramaic Targums, it's ka'ari again, like a lion. When you look at the writings in the Talmud, we get something a little bit different. We get ka'aru, which means they defaced. Ka'ar means to deface. And then the u is the third masculine plural ending. And then if you go to the Greek text, you've got something different. It's arose. Oh, I can't even say that. Aruzav, which means they dug. Now that's really interesting that the Greek Septuagint says they dug, because as it turns out, the word that we're probably looking for, aru, means to dig, or is it kara? Now I have to look it up. Also,
and that's how they get pierced. Like obviously, the New King James isn't the best translation, but like they obviously eventually translate it to pierce.
Kara means to dig, and that's not actually in the text. So the reason why people are saying, well, maybe it says kara, is because of the Greek Septuagint using dig, because kara can mean dig. But we don't have an actual Hebrew text that has that. The Hebrew texts that we have say like a lion. Now, it could also be ka'ar, which means to be ugly or to be defaced. We actually have those texts. We have Hebrew texts of Psalm 22 that say ka'ar. So we have no evidence at all that the word dakar, to pierce, shows up in the text. The closest you'll ever get is kara, which doesn't mean to pierce. It means to dig. And that's exactly what we would find if he was being attacked by a pack of animals, which is what it says. It says he's being attacked metaphorically by a pack of dogs. And before you respond, let me read these super chats before they disappear. Caller just hit the gym, save some money, travel the world, start a business, give to the homeless, and forgive yourself. Make yourself proud. And Daniel says the Bible is arresting your development, your drug. I agree. The Bible is absolutely doing that. So Psalm 22, first of all, is not even a psalm. Not even a prophecy. Second of all, it doesn't say anything about piercing. This is just David talking about his struggles. That's it.
Yeah, but nowhere in David's life have they ever divided their garments, and animals also
How would you know that?
Lots for their clothes.
How would you know that?
Lots for their clothes.
How would you know that?
That's a simple thing to. That's like
no. How do you know that David's enemies never divided his clothing?
Well, it would have been written.
What you think every event in David's life was written? And as it turns out, it was written. It was written in Psalm 22. So now you're just calling David a liar.
No, I'm not calling him a liar, because that's why there was such a debate on Psalm 22. That's why they said
it was written in Psalm 22. David says in Psalm 22 that his clothing was divided. Are you aware that that's what happened to people when they were conquered in battle? That their clothes were taken from them?
Well, that never happened to David because he escaped, because God had his hand on him. So that didn't happen to David, and he was never bound, and they never cast their loss.
You're wrong again. You're wrong again. David says that it happened to him. So either one of two things is true. Either it happened to David, and you're just telling David that he's a liar, or it's just a poetry about his warfare struggles.
Or it's also a prophecy about what happened.
Or it's not a prophecy. A prophecy is an actual prophecy. So what you're going to say is every single word of this psalm is about King David. But magically, when we get to verse 16, we're just going to call it a prophecy. But you wouldn't do that with anything else. If I took you to Deuteronomy chapter 20 and I read it to you, could you tell me if it's a prophecy?
Well, not to get too far off, but I would say this is a prophecy about
It's not
Christ.
a prophecy.
Like if you read the Gospels,
it's in the past tense. I don't care what the Gospel says. Everything in verse 16 and 17 is in the past tense and the present tense. Yeah, a prophecy is about what's going to happen in the future.
Exactly. So if you read the Gospels and you read the account
again,
Christ,
I don't care what the Gospel says.
Tear his garments.
I don't care. We all know that.
They did mangle his.
No one cares. No one can hear you. I already muted you. Everybody knows what the New Testament says. Nobody cares. We're talking about what is a proper hermeneutic to know that something is a prophecy. And something's not a prophecy just because you want it to be a prophecy. Do you understand? A prophecy is an actual genre.
But you're going against so many ancient Jewish people.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you did.
No,
yes,
I'm not. No, I'm not.
The information. Yes.
No, I'm not.
That's why Psalm 22 is
You're
so singled out.
Psalm 22 is not a messianic psalm according to the Jews.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. You can cry all you want. You're lying.
You're a liar.
I've read the text. I've read the Messianic text. I've read the text, the book.
I've read the Messianic text. Too,
yes, I know the book that you're quoting from, and you're a liar because I've read the rest. I've read the rest of the Jewish text that you haven't read, and the rest of the Jewish texts disagree with you. What you've done is you've read apologetic books, and you haven't read all of the Jewish writings. If you've read all of the Jewish writings, you would find out that anyone who practiced Peser believed that anything could be a prophecy, but the actual Jews in charge, the actual Pharisees, the actual Sadducees, the actual people that were the leaders of Israel didn't practice that. You're appealing to a bullshit. You're appealing to a bullshit hermeneutic to say that a prophecy is what a prophecy is not. A prophecy is not anything you want it to be.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But like, even there's so many. Like Jesus even takes like what it talks about the serpent being raised in the wilderness, and then we'll be saved.
That's the Book of Numbers.
I'll be doing the same thing.
But that's not a prophecy either.
Okay, right.
See, this is the problem you have. You can't just say that Jesus said things that showed up in the Old Testament and they remind you of Jesus, and therefore it's a prophecy. That's bullshit. I've got a whole list of things about me. Do you want to see all the prophecies that I fulfilled? I'll show you. I'll show you all the prophecies that I'm going to show you all the prophecies that I've fulfilled, based on the same hermeneutic that you've applied.
There's actual prophecies that God obviously gives that specifically.
I'm just going to mute you. Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Are you aware that my son is Egyptian? Let me unmute you. Say, are you aware that my son is Egyptian?
I don't care about if your son's being an Egyptian or not.
Okay, so my son's Egyptian, and that means I fulfilled Hosea 11:1 because I called my son out of Egypt. You see how garbage that interpretive model is? Your whole interpretive model for Jesus is that you can take anything in the Old Testament and just call it a prophecy if it vaguely reminds you of Jesus. But when I do the same thing, you're not going to let me do it. I guarantee you. Isaiah 65:9, I will bring forth descendants. Did I fulfill that prophecy?
I did too. Like if you take it that way, but that's so clumsy.
Ecclesiastes 9:4 says, I have joined myself to a dog rather than the dead lion. I fulfilled that. Am I the Messiah now? You see how easy it is to find things that you could pair up to somebody if you're just taking random texts from the Old Testament that aren't even prophecies. Exodus 4:12. Now go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak. That's what I do every day. I'm up here teaching people what to speak. Is that a prophecy about me?
I never said it was. I never said those things, like things that are symbolic in the Old Testament. I never said those were prophecies.
Okay, so Psalm 22 is not a prophecy then.
Well, it is a prophecy because Jesus.
No, it's not a prophecy. See, your starting point is it's a prophecy because Jesus said it's a prophecy, although he didn't actually say that. But
he does it while he's on the cross.
He quotes it. He doesn't say it's a prophecy. He just quotes from it.
No, he doesn't say that it's a prophecy.
Okay, so Jesus doesn't say it's a prophecy.
These things are being fulfilled.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that. You're lying again. He didn't say that.
Oh my God! So Jesus doesn't say that. My God, why?
Yes, he quotes the first line of the psalm. What he doesn't say is that it's a prophecy, and he doesn't say that he's fulfilling it. So here's the problem. Your justification that Jesus is the Messiah is that he fulfilled prophecies. And when we look at the prophecies, he didn't fulfill them. And you're going to tell me, well, these things that aren't actually prophecies, they're prophecies because Jesus said so. But that's bullshit. I use the same thing about me. I can say that Job 27:11 is a prophecy about me. And I know it's a prophecy about me because I told you it's a prophecy about me. I will teach you concerning the hand of God. I'm doing that right now. It's a prophecy about me. You know it's a prophecy about me because I told you it's a prophecy about me. But that's circular reasoning. You can't use the justification of fulfilled prophecies by pointing to non-prophecies and then saying that they are prophecies actually because Jesus said so.
Jesus didn't say it was a prophecy.
I agree. He didn't.
Jesus quotes Psalm 22.
Yeah. Do you think there's a reason why he did it?
Because he was fulfilling what was written.
No, there's nothing to be fulfilled there. No, Jesus quoted it because David went through similar struggles. Have you read all of the Psalms of David's lament?
Yes.
Okay, are you aware that some of them were quite famous in the first century?
But it doesn't...
Are you aware that some of them were quite famous in the first century? It's a yes or no question. I know you're getting frustrated that I don't buy your bullshit.
No, you're not letting me talk, dude. You just interrupted me.
That's because I ask you easy questions, and then you want to not answer them. Do you know that some of David's Psalms were quite popular by the first century.
Okay.
And do you know which ones? Do you know which ones were the most popular?
No, I don't.
His laments. Do you know why his laments were the most popular?
Because they're very relatable. And talks about his struggle.
Because they're fucking relatable. Because the nation of Israel had been struggling for centuries. And so when Jesus is on the cross and he's dying and he's breathing his last breaths, he's thinking of the laments of David. And he cries out one of the most famous laments of David because he's struggling the same way David struggled. That doesn't make it a prophecy. And guess what? Hold on. Just stop talking. Even if Jesus said it was a prophecy, it's still bullshit, because it's not a prophecy just because somebody says it's a prophecy. A prophecy is a clear genre of text. And Aaron, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says the New Testament is irrelevant, just as the Book of Mormon is irrelevant. I agree.
The New Testament's not irrelevant.
It
Those
is.
were literally eyewitness accounts.
It's a book of lies. There's no eyewitnesses there.
This is how they preached the gospel. They didn't have the New Testament at the time. That's why they went to the Old
Doesn't
Testament.
matter. There's no eyewitnesses in the New Testament. Also, Daniel, thank you for the $5 super chat. Daniel says, "Caller, just tell them I'm rubber and you're glue." That's a great one. I like that.
So like when
okay,
Paul
so
talks about how
give me the eyewitnesses. Give me the eyewitnesses. What are their names?
Matthew was an eyewitness.
Matthew didn't write Matthew. His name's not in there.
Okay, well, yeah, that's a whole different debate.
Who wrote Matthew?
I assume it's Matthew.
His name's not in it. Show me where Matthew says, "I Matthew wrote this." Also,
okay,
JL, thank you for the $6.66. JL, I appreciate the donation. He says guests should quit while he's way behind. I agree. He's digging this hole real deep. They got a glutton for punishment here tonight. So Matthew,
John is also an eyewitness.
Okay, show me in the Gospel of John where it said John wrote it, because I can show you in the Gospel of John where there's authors other than John. Have you read all of John? Did you read chapter 1? Did you read chapter 21?
Yes.
So again, you've read apologetic books, but you haven't actually read the text itself. John 21 clearly says that there are multiple authors, and the multiple authors are recording the Gospel of John, and it includes the testimony of John. So the authors, plural, of the book of John were writing a narrative, and that narrative happened to include testimony from John. It actually happened to include testimony from John the Baptist at one point.
Yeah, so John. So it's said that the Gospel of John and also the Book of Revelation were written around the same time because of the language and how John talks about Christ. So
not the scholars I know of. The scholars I know of don't believe that the Gospel of John were written by the Revelator. That's why we have the title John. That's why we have the title John the Revelator. Because John the Revelator, also known as John the Elder, is different from John the gospel author. But we don't even have evidence that John wrote John. And I just told you in John 21, the authors are not John. I'll just read it for you since, again, I know you haven't. All right, John chapter 21, verse 24. This is the disciple who is testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. And this happens more than once in the Gospel of John. There's multiple occasions where who's ever writing the Gospel of John says that they are taking somebody else's testimony. So if John's testimony is included in the Gospel of John, that's great. But he's not the one who wrote it. So the language of John is meaningless because John didn't write it.
It doesn't even say that he doesn't write it. It says that him, and then there's others who testify of that, who are the disciples. So that doesn't disqualify John from writing it.
No, wrong. I read. Since you weren't listening, I'll read it again. This is the disciple who testified to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. We is a plural. The person who is the we is clearly the person who is writing the sentence. That's a first person common plural. It's a we. Whoever wrote John, it's a we. And they're including testimony that they received from John.
It says this is the disciple who testifies of these things and wrote these things, and we know.
Yeah.
And we know that
Yeah.
his testimony is true.
And who's we?
The disciples.
No, the disciples
Yes.
didn't write this. The we is the authors.
Yes, John did. It says
No,
this
the we is the author. Have you ever written a text? Do you know who we is?
Says,
when you write a text, do you know who we is?
It literally says this.
When you write a text, do you know who we is?
Yes, and it
who's
says
we?
This is the disciple.
Who's
this
we?
Is the disciple
who's
who testifies
we?
of these things and wrote.
I'm going to mute you till you answer my question. You can talk all you want. You're going to answer my question whether you like it or not. You can cry all night, but you're going to answer my questions.
Then why don't you just let me talk?
In a written text, who is we?
A group of people who are testifying.
No. We is a first person reference. What is a first person reference?
A first person reference. It's directed towards the person, the main person's perspective.
No, it's directed towards the person speaking. And in this case, we is plural. There are multiple people speaking.
Dude, it literally says right before that, this is the disciple, singular, who testifies of these things and wrote these things.
Yes.
And we, as a group, and we, the disciples.
It doesn't say the disciples. It says we know that his testimony is true.
Who do you think that we is, dude?
We is the people writing the gospel. I don't know why this is so hard for you. John is in the third person. The way that you talk about this is that if somebody is giving you a testimony that you want to include, you would say, his testimony is true, and we verify it. That's how authorship works. The we is always referring to the person speaking or the person writing.
Yeah, he literally says that he testifies of these things and wrote these things.
I know, and then what did they do with them?
Well, about what they saw, they wrote it down.
Yes, exactly. Yes, they wrote them down. The multiple authors working on the Gospel of John
He
took John's testimony.
Author.
Yeah, we'll just try this again from the beginning. I don't know why, like, logic and basic English is so hard for some people. It says, we know that his testimony is true. Is this a quotation from somebody in the narrative?
I guess so. There's no quotation.
Why is there no quotation in my Bible?
I don't know. There's no quotation in my Bible
because
either.
It's not a quotation. It's an editorial note from the editors of the book. We know that his testimony is true. The editors compiling the book are saying we know that John's testimony is true. The authors are not John.
It literally says at the beginning.
We've read it 5 times.
Let me finish. It says at the beginning, this is the disciple, single. He's talking about a single person. This is the disciple.
But who's saying it?
John.
No, John's not saying it.
Dude, he's using
not.
A single. He is.
No, you don't refer to yourself as this disciple, and you don't refer to yourself as his testimony. You refer to somebody else's testimony as his testimony. When it says, we know that his testimony is true, that's somebody talking about John's testimony. It's not hard. It's basic English. If you need to go back and take 5th grade English, just let me know.
No, because I'm reading it, and it's... If you like what you're trying to say about the different we's...
Is that words have meanings, yes.
Yeah, if you look at the Gospel of Luke, it is a recording of multiple different eyewitnesses.
We're not reading the Gospel of Luke. We're reading the Gospel of John. And in the Gospel of John, the authors are recording the testimony of John.
Yes.
There we go. Yes, fantastic. I don't know why it took so long to get there.
John is recording.
John's not recording. John's giving his testimony to other people who are compiling them.
What is the point that you're trying to get right now?
My point is very clear. We have no idea who wrote the Gospel of John. Whoever wrote it is compiling sources, and one of their sources appears to be the apostle.
It literally says, "This is the disciple." That's singular.
Yeah,
Who
keep reading.
testifies of these things.
Yes,
So it's a singular disciple.
Read
who's
it.
testifying
Read
of
the
these
after
things.
the comma. Read it.
Oh my God, dude.
And it says yes, and
we
that's
and we.
also.
Yes, that's a conjunction. Yep, I'm glad you know what a conjunction is.
We know that his testimony.
Yes, and who's we? And he's gone again. Where'd he go? He dropped out. He'll come back. I think he'll come back. I don't know. It sounded like his wife or his coach is in the background trying to help him out with his English. I couldn't tell. I've never seen somebody who just can't grasp how the English language work. It's not hard. The collective editors of the Gospel of John is saying that they've received his testimony and they're vouching for it. We know that his testimony is true. It's very easy. It's always the same thing. Listen, without lies, Christianity dies. That's all you have. All you have is words don't mean words, and anything can be a prophecy. Anything at all. Anything you ever want to be a prophecy is a prophecy as long as it fits your preconceived notion about who the Messiah is. Anyways, he's not coming back. I guess we'll move on. Maybe his wife finally took him. Flanker420, thank you for the $5 super chat. Flanker says, don't some Bibles literally say that the names of Gospels are church traditions? Yeah, my Bible actually tells you that in the study notes. Daniel, thank you for the $2 super chat. Daniel says, I'm bored with him anyways. Bring Sam Shamoon. Listen, I actually like Sam Shamoon. I don't think he would actually come to debate me because he does the anti-Muslim debates. So I'm not really sure that's happening anytime soon. But we've got Santi. I think Santi is in the queue by accident. Didn't we already talk to him? Give me a second. Let's see what Santi is back with. Santi, welcome back.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to give somebody else a turn, but I just wanted to say if I can, right? I don't know if you'll let me. The title of the conversation is very misleading because it's talking about prove God is in your imagination, right? Prove me wrong. Or God is. The title of the stream is basically God is in your imagination. Prove me wrong, right?
It says your God is imaginary. Yeah. Can you
prove me wrong?
Can you imagine your God?
Yeah, but when I told you my definition of God, and I proved to you through the creation of all these things.
You didn't prove anything.
Well, by creation. So if
you made claims, I don't believe there was a creation.
But you got to go through my belief. Right?
We're not going to rehash all this. Listen, God is imaginary because you can envision him in your imagination, and you can't demonstrate that he exists anywhere outside of your imagination. So he's imaginary.
So basically, are you did you study theology? Did you study all these, or was it self-taught? Did you go to school for that? For this?
Yeah, I've got 2 degrees. I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in biblical studies. That's why I know it's bullshit.
So, when you went to this type of school, did everybody have the same interpretation of things? That people disagree? That people agree?
Everybody disagrees in school,
right?
That's the great thing about school is that you're surrounded by people who don't agree, and you get a good array of opinions. And as it turns out, though, there's a lot of people who deconvert during Bible college and seminary for many of the same reasons that we're all learning tonight, because Jesus fulfilled 0 prophecies. There's no evidence for God. The Bible says flatly false things about the world around us and about history. But listen, I gotta bring somebody in that wants to debate, my man.
No, go ahead. Thank you, man.
All right, cheers. Thanks for being here. Good to hear from you, man. He was nice, though. I think we had a good conversation last time. I'm going to get Sarah in the box, and then we've got Mark and then Jacob next. So we're going to get Mark in here. He's been waiting for a while, and then Jacob is next after Mark. Welcome in, Sarah.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. All right, well, Mark's been in the box. I don't know if he's still in the box. We're going to see if he connects. Welcome in, Mark. Mark? Hello? Nothing? Well, Mark was in the box too long, I guess. He's dropped out. All right, now we're on to Jacob. And guys, thanks for being here. It's kind of an off night. I know it's not Wednesday, it's Tuesday. I was hoping to test some software tonight. My Facebook stream didn't work out. I might test that tomorrow. Try it again, second time, see what I broke, what I did wrong. And we're going to get Jacob in here. If you're not already following Sarah, known as Leaving Faith, make sure you do. Also, Sarah, you have a YouTube, don't you? You have a YouTube channel that people can find?
Yes. Some people were saying they had a hard time with the link. It should be linked in my bio, but you can just search Leaving Faith. I'm Leaving Faith on YouTube too.
Yeah, all one word.
Come find me there.
Definitely follow Sarah. Actually, Sarah was one of the first creators I found when I first got online. So we go back quite a way. Ricky, thank you for the $5 super chat. Ricky says, "You are too smart for these callers. I would love to see you debate biblical scholars and make them look stupid." Here's the deal. I'm going to tell you something crazy. And I know people don't believe me, but most biblical scholars actually agree with me. They know that there's problems in the Bible, and that's why you don't see them debating on stage. The best you're going to get are goofballs like William Lane Craig or Justin Bass. And these are people who are just experiencing supreme levels of cope using horrible hermeneutics, and they'll just say anything they can to save face. But most scholars, especially Old Testament scholars, agree with me, and I have plenty of data to back that up. But we've got Jacob in the house now. Welcome in, Jacob.
Hey, so I was just scrolling on here. I just seen your page there. Now I understand that you're saying my God's imaginary, but I want to hear your reasoning behind it. And you said there that you've got 2 degrees in biblical theology, and me myself, I'm 20 years old. I've grown up in the faith, and to me, and respectfully, he's real to me in my perspective. On this earth, it's have all these different perspectives and these different ideas and whatnot, and I'm genuinely curious. I want to know more how people think and want to hear their ideas and whatnot. Now, that being said, I'm be respectful of you. I genuinely want to know where you're coming with this information from. I would like to, that guy didn't seem like he knew very well what he was talking about on when I first come in. It was that redheaded guy. And I do some of my personal study and in my personal time. I feel my walk with Yahweh is not as good as it should be, but I still have one. And to me, my perspective, he's the only God here. He created the earth. I see evidence everywhere. You breathe and you speak in his name. That's his. Every time you breathe in,
I don't.
I know it's funny. I know it sounds funny, but
I don't say Yahweh when I breathe.
Well, sir, it's the breathe in and breathe out part.
Yeah, actually, Sarah is a physiologist. She's a PhD physiologist. If you wanted to hear how the mechanics of breathing doesn't result in Yahweh.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't see her on here. I don't.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can't see Sarah. Can you hear her? Sarah, can you talk?
Yeah, sorry. I
can't hear her. No, sir.
See him.
She can't hear you. It's goofy. I got to find a way to connect the audio from TikTok over to Streamlabs, because TikTok can hear everything from Streamlabs, but for some reason on TikTok you can only hear my voice. You can't hear what's happening in Streamlabs. And I wonder why that is. I bet if I add an additional microphone, I bet I can add I can probably add a source for Streamlabs. Let me see if it'll let me do that. It will not. It will not let me do that. I might have to create a virtual microphone and then import the virtual microphone into TikTok Studio for this to work out.
Okay.
It's fine.
But either way, you can hear everybody but Sarah, it sounds like.
Yeah, I can hear you for sure, sir. I don't know if there's somebody else in the thing, but I just see me on the screen and you on the screen, you know.
Sure.
And
So,
maybe, go
I
ahead.
mean, we could waste some time on the name of Yahweh. I don't know if that's beneficial. I'd rather talk about some more substantive matters.
Well, what I would like to know is where you're coming from this, and I would like you to provide the evidence for me. You know, and you said earlier, people in Bible college, you know, they will sometimes turn away from the faith. You know, I want that same evidence. I want to understand where you're coming from when you make this claim. You know, because like I said earlier, this world is full of different perspectives and different ideals. Now, you know, I'm willing to give you mine if you're willing to be just as respectful as I am going to be to you, you know, and you know, this is a debate. Now, me personally, I can tell you what I know, and you know, I'm not one to say, well, hey, here's this, but I'm one to say, you got a question, I can go find somebody who knows the answer. I can come back to you with that answer.
Right. Yeah, so I'll give you a couple reasons why I turned away from Christianity. I think the first thing that stood out to me was the manuscript evidence. So one of the reasons why I went to school initially is because I wanted to read the manuscripts in the original languages. And that turned out to be pretty problematic because like we actually don't know what was in the original manuscripts because we don't have any actual manuscripts from the time period. So for example, from the time period of Moses, right? Moses theoretically would have wrote in Egyptian, or he would have wrote in Proto-Sinaitic, and we have no manuscripts even close to that. Our oldest manuscript that mentions anything from Moses' time period is a little tiny amulet on silver from Ketif Hinnom, and it's just a little snippet from the blessings, the blessing in the Book of Numbers, and that's from the 6th century. So almost 1,000 years after Moses is the first even snippet of biblical text that we have. And then if we compare the text that we have of the Hebrew manuscripts, they all disagree. For every sentence in the Hebrew Bible, I can find you 5 different variants. It's not a good setup. And some of them are actually kind of important variants. Now, when we get to the New Testament, we have a lot more manuscripts because they're more recent, but they disagree pretty drastically in places too. And like, for example, there's a spot in 1 Corinthians where it talks about the women being, you know, I don't want to use the word rowdy, but it talks about the women being a distraction in church. Well, as it turns out, the earliest manuscripts don't have that. We find it initially in the margins, and then we find it inserted kind of randomly. And then in later manuscripts, it's even moved. So all the manuscripts we have of this particular passage has a very important comment about women that if we believe the Bible is holy, we should take seriously. And we can't even tell if it's original to the text, or if it is original to the text, why it was removed and where it was supposed to be. So we've got lots of manuscript issues, but even if you get past all that, we've got issues because what the book says on many occasions is just wrong. Like in Job 38:14, it says the earth is flat. All throughout the Bible, it says that there's a dome over the earth, referred to in Hebrew as the Dorikia. We know there's no dome over the earth.
I'm sorry, sir. Hold on just a moment. If you don't mind me, I'm going to fact check and because when people give scripture, I want to make sure I know exactly what it says, and if that's okay with you, that's the way I'd like to do this. You know.
Sure.
You said what book?
Check out Job 38:14.
Job 38:14. See here. Someone set this down. $38.14, just about there.
Sure.
And is it all right if I read it aloud?
Oh no, go ahead. I'd love for you to read it. Yeah.
I'm reading out of the Baker Illustrated Bible. It's a Christian Standard.
Yeah.
BBS.
Yep.
Now, you said Job 38, verse 14.
Right.
Which starts, the earth is changed as clay and is is by a seal. Its heels stand out like the folds of a garment. Light is withheld from the wicked, and the arm raised in violence is broken.
Right. And most translations will say something along the lines of the earth is formed like clay beneath a seal, which is a pretty honest rendering of the Hebrew text. Now, I've got a seal. Hold on. This little guy right here is an example. Can you see my screen?
Is that a wax seal, sir?
Almost. This is 3D printed, but this would have been on clay, a hardened clay, or it would have been carved in wood, or other various methods. It could have been carved in stone, even. You can't see it, but there's like an imprint here, and you can roll it on the clay, and it creates an image, right?
Yes, sir.
So Job is saying in 38:14 that the earth is formed like clay beneath a seal, which is flat with topology, right? And in fact, the clay seal that he's likely referring to, which was more common in his time period, was a ring seal. So you would have a seal on your ring, and you would press it into the clay, and it would create like a little disc. So Job 38:14 expresses that the earth is like clay beneath a seal, which, oddly enough, every other text from the ancient Near East describes the earth the same way. It's a flat circular disc with a dome over top of it. Mm-hmm. So to me, because I'm pretty familiar with the Babylonian and the Akkadian texts and the Egyptian texts, to me, when everybody in the ancient world believed that the earth was a flat disc with a dome over top of it, and then the Bible says that the earth is a flat disc with a dome over top of it, I'm inclined to believe that the writers of the Bible believed the same thing as everybody else from their time period. It just happened to be that it's wrong, because the earth is not flat with a dome over top of it.
Right. Now, here's a thought. Now, I personally am not a flat earther. I won't put that out there. But the thought just came to me, we're three-dimensional beings. If we cast let me see how to put this, piece of paper, two-dimensional, then you got one-dimensional beings too, we don't know what it's like to be two-dimensional, right? We perceive everything three-dimensionally. Now, with that being said, you can take that verse, earth is changed by a seal, looks like a seal with a dome over top of it. Well, to us, maybe we just perceive it as round. In reality, since we are set apart from God, maybe it is flat. With all of this, and I'm just giving you something to think about. Now, I don't know if any of this is true. Take it by a grain of salt. But the idea, I've got a plate here. Two-dimensionally, that is a disc, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a being on that two-dimensional wheel, what if it looks like a ball?
Sure, yeah. But is it divine revelation when it says that it is in fact formed like the disc? Because we can say that it might be like a matter of perspective, but the book does kind of make a definitive claim about reality. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's where the faith part comes in. You can sit in a chair and have faith that it's going to hold you up, when in reality it couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the whole thing with Christianity and with my God, is I've got the faith that He's there. I don't have proof.
Right.
I can't tell you, well, this day on this time and this hour and on that second, He come to me and He said, "Hey, I'm here." I can't tell you that. What I know is my faith. And as you said earlier, if you got to take everything in the Bible to be true, you've got to take it by every part of it. So if the Bible says it's flat, then it's flat. Right. But then again, I don't know. I'm three-dimensional being, and God, we can't physically see Him, but I know that Jesus Christ, hey, he came on down to the earth. He made it happen, so he knows. The only way we will know is when we all die, we'll eventually find out, whether I'm right or you're right. What difference does it make?
Well, it does kind of make a difference, right? Because according to New Testament theology, if I don't believe in Christianity, I go to the lake of fire.
I mean, sure.
Right? So what you believe is kind of important.
I mean, yes, it is important, sir. And I believe, we are given the instructions, the manual of life to make it through on how it's supposed to be, but we will never know until we're off of this earth and or Jesus Christ comes back who is right or wrong.
Well,
if he is real or not, sir.
Well, let me posit a few things about the Bible being a manual, if you don't mind. So we could talk about like the biblical contradictions or the scientific inaccuracies, but at the end of the day, like you can wash those away. You can say that they're scribal errors. You can say that mankind manipulated the text, like the lying scribes, according to Jeremiah. But we've got like really serious problems with the text, like the fact that God condones slavery, that God thinks that women who don't bleed on their wedding night should be stoned. These are laws that, to me, are like horrific. And it's also true that like it's weird that we have this all-loving God, but like he creates tornadoes and tsunamis and earthquakes that just randomly execute people. Like, how do we account for these things?
It's going to sound like a really generic answer, but I believe all of these came about because of the fall. Everything was perfect in the garden. God created, everything to be perfect, and you can read there in Genesis, the creation story. I won't read it to you because I don't know how much time you want to spend on that and whatnot.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did God know that Adam and Eve would sin?
Absolutely.
Okay, right. Did God set the consequences for the sin?
Yep.
Right, okay. Did God have to make the consequences of their sin such that natural disasters would be a result?
Sure.
He had to?
Yeah.
Why?
Because we weren't perfect.
No. My question is, after Adam and Eve sinned, you're saying this is when God changed nature so that there would be natural disasters. But what was forcing him to do that? Why did he have to do that?
Because we sinned. We rejected the grace of God. We rejected him.
No,
when we chose what we chose.
No,
right?
We know about the sin.
Whole, right.
All right. Well, let me give you an illustration. Before we do that, Glycan, thank you for the $5 super chat. I appreciate the super chat. It says, ask him how a perfect creator can desire something imperfect. If they create or desire something imperfect, then they aren't a perfect creator. That is a good question. I don't know if we want to waste time on that logical trap tonight, but that is a good one. I do like that argument. Parker uses that one. But I'm going to give you a small analogy to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to say here. Okay, so I have a child. If my child goes to school and does something that he's not supposed to, let's imagine he steals lunch from another kid. Now, it's true that he stole lunch from another kid, and it's true that there needs to be repercussions for that, right? But the repercussions that he receives from me, that's my own choosing. That's a decision that I make. Like, I can decide to ground him. I can decide to, make him skip dinner and feel what it's like to not have food. You know what I mean? What happens to him after he does the bad thing is my decision, right? So what I'm suggesting is that when Adam and Eve sinned, yes, they absolutely sinned. I mean, we can talk about whether or not that was part of design, but that's a separate topic. What is also true is that the response to the sin was a decision that God made. God could have done anything he wanted to as a result, right?
Right.
Okay. But his decision, the decision that he landed on, was that the earth would have natural disasters, right?
Right.
Now, could he have created the earth as such that there wouldn't be natural disasters?
I'm sure if he wanted to.
Right. So then my perspective is God made a conscious decision to make natural disasters when he didn't have to, which means God is creating a slew of what we would call unnecessary suffering. And that to me is inconsistent with the idea of an all good God.
Okay.
Right? Like
I see your point, sir. I really do. Now, going back to what you say, your kid goes to school, punches somebody in the nose, you have the decision of what you do to discipline. Right? And then you did just say, well, God has that same decision. You know, we are all God's children. We are all his creation, you know, and ultimately that is his decision on what he does to this world. And through those natural disasters, sir, do you know how many people might come to know him? Do you know how many people may come to realize and say, hey, I can't do that, you know, this happened to this, you know, and it has an impact on people's lives. You know, I live here in Tennessee. We just had that Helene storm come through. My granddaddy was affected by it.
Right. So,
you know, and so my point of that is he does this stuff for his own glory so he can bring us back into his glory.
I hear what you're
Does
saying.
that make sense?
Yeah, what you're suggesting is that the natural disasters are needed. They're not
Correct.
unnecessary. Okay. So then the next question I would ask is, does God have the ability to bring those people to him without the natural disasters?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
but then again, going back to what you said, it is his decision because he is God.
That's right. Yeah. So if God has the ability to accomplish the goal of bringing those people to him, then the natural disasters are still unnecessary. He could have done it without the natural disasters, which means the natural disasters are still unnecessary.
They're not unnecessary if that's what he chooses to do.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
If it's going to take a tornado to come through your house to see, hey, yeah, I'm wrong in my life, you know, and I don't know you from Adam to sin, you know, I don't know you at all. I don't know your life. You don't know my life, you know.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, it might be different from what you need to recognize who he is and that you are away from his glory. Then it might take, you know, Billy Bob Joe down back in the holler there, you know, for a tornado to come through his house to say, okay, God, hey, I'm in the wrong, you know, and that's what he wants. Right. He wants you to say, hey, I can't do this on myself. I can't do it. You know, I've tried doing it myself, you know, and, you know, so it takes all different kinds. You know, a missionary goes to Africa and he converts 10,000 people. That's the way God wanted to do that.
Right.
If he wants to use natural disaster and he wants to use famine and he wants to use disease to bring people to him, and that's the way he'll do it.
Right. But listen, what I'm saying here is you've already said that these people that God wants to bring to him, right? Mm-hmm. God has the ability to bring them to him without the natural disasters, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if he has the ability to accomplish that goal without the natural disasters, then that still means that the natural disasters were unnecessary.
No, sir.
But then, okay, we'll try this again. Okay. So I'll lay out a scenario. If Sarah says, I need you, Justin, to roll this big boulder to the other side of the yard, and I choose to push it with my car. I could have done it by hand if I really wanted to, but I was lazy, so I pushed it with my car. And then I damaged the car. And she's like, what did you do that? You damaged your car for? And she would have said, listen, you could have pushed it by hand. It was unnecessary to push it with your car. You didn't need to do that. And I would have said, you're right. I didn't have to do it that way. I chose to do it that way. Therefore, the damage on my car is my own responsibility. I didn't have to use my car. I chose to use my car. So in the same way, if God's goal is to bring people to him, and he has the ability to do it without natural disasters, but then he chooses to use natural disasters, well, then he's on the hook for all the harm caused by the natural disasters.
Well, again, sir, if that's the way he wants to do it, that's the way he'll do it. You know, and
I get that.
Like I said, what it might take you to come and realize his glory could be different from what somebody else has to do and come to realize glory. You know, and I get that. Yes, you know, you're saying it's on him for all of the people who got hurt and never got to come to realization.
Well, let me ask you a question.
You know, and
do you
yes,
remember?
sir.
Do you remember 2010 when the earthquake hit Haiti?
2010.
Yeah, there was a bad earthquake in Haiti, and in 2010.
Well, truth be told, sir, I was in first grade in 2010, so I mean, I don't remember a whole lot back then.
Listen, I'm an antique, okay?
Yes, sir.
So in 2010, there was an earthquake that hit Haiti, and 200,000 people were executed, and even more of them were permanently damaged, or you know, they had missing limbs, you know, things like that. But did you know that 97.5% of the population of Haiti is already Christian?
Right.
So
okay.
It seems to me that if God is using the earthquake to bring people to him, that it's kind of redundant because they already believe in him.
He used them to bring them back home.
I get that.
You know, that was his plan.
Right.
You know, and again, I say, even back then, I'm sure there was missionaries and whatnot going down there to help rebuild Haiti and everything. You know, they probably sent missions down there to help.
Yeah.
Now, I myself am not God. I can't understand his thinking. I'll never be able to because I will never be God.
Right.
But I know if he wanted to, he can use anything for his glory.
He can, but does he need to?
Sure.
Okay.
He's God. That's the whole point.
I know, but
you know, his whole ideal of things is he's a selfish God. We were told that in the Bible.
He is.
He is selfish
and jealous.
And yes.
Right.
So he wants everything to be about him, and that's how it is supposed to be. It's supposed to be about God.
Let me ask you a question.
It doesn't particularly matter if I say, oh, well, that hurricane, you know, killed thousands of people, and it was just so rude of him. Just so rude of him.
Right.
You know. But then again, sir, I wasn't there when the earth was created.
Right.
I wasn't there when he said, let there be light, and called it good.
Right. Can I ask you a question?
I'm here and today. You know, and so for that, you know, go ahead.
Right. Okay. I'm going to lay out a scenario for you with my child. So imagine I take my child in to get a polio vaccine, and there's two scenarios. In the first scenario, we come in and the doctor approaches my son, and then he gives him the polio vaccine. The needle hurts. No one likes needles, but he gets the vaccine and then we leave. The second scenario is the doctor walks in, he slaps my son in the face, then he gives him the vaccine, and then he leaves. Which of those scenarios is beneficial or better?
Well, I guess depending on your viewpoint of it, you know, you would say just coming in and giving him the vaccine. But, sir, some people need to be slapped in the face before they get the vaccine, you know.
Not my son.
Do you understand what I'm saying, you know?
I do, actually. Some people need a distraction or else you'll never actually get the vaccine in them. But
right.
So I'll change it. Let's say the doctor walks in and punches him in the nose, and then he gives him the vaccine, right?
Right.
So we would agree that the better of the two scenarios is where he doesn't punch my son in the nose. And the reason is because even though vaccines hurt, the needle hurts, the punching of the nose is an unnecessary step in the process, right?
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. So we would say the same thing about God then. Like if God can accomplish his goals, he can complete all of his steps, and he can do it without punching my son in the nose, then he's bad if he punches my son in the nose. Like if he could bring people to him without natural disasters and accomplish his goals, but he chooses to use natural disasters anyways, well, then he's bad because that's the equivalent of punching my son in the nose.
But if that's the only way people are going to come to him, that's the way.
But
if that's the only way to administrate the vaccine, sir, to only get their attention to say, hey, you've hit rock bottom, now you got to go up and choose your way of doing it. Maybe that hurricane is the way to do it.
But if you're saying that that's the only way it could possibly happen, then you're saying God's not all powerful.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, is God all powerful?
What I'm saying, sir, is he is all powerful because he allows it to happen.
No.
He makes his choices on the way his plan's going to go.
Right, but
he's already got everything set out. He knows what's going to work to bring the people back to his faith and, bring them back into their glory. He knows how to do it.
I know, but
if that way is way through the hurricane and through the earthquake, sir, and the punching of the nose to get the vaccine, that's the way he'll do it.
Right.
Sure, there's a more gentler way of saying, hey, you've been away from me, man. I miss you. I want you to come on back home to me. I want you to embrace me again. I'm sure if there's somebody who will accept it that way, they will do it.
Right.
But some people, like I am stubborn as damn ass.
That's okay. I'm stubborn too. Listen, I might be the most stubborn person on the live tonight. Let me read out some super chats real quick. Dex, thank you for the $2 super chat. Says it sounds like a lot of dogma. It kind of is. I get it. Most of us were Christians once. We've said a lot of these things before. And Glycan, thank you for the $5 super chat. Glycan says creation requires time and space to exist and occur, meaning so-called creator didn't create everything as they claim, did he now? And I agree. That's an argument I don't think we're going to run tonight because the night's starting to get late, but I love the logical argument of creation. But I want to, maybe we can address this one more time because I don't want to keep going over it over and over again. But so I just want, yes or no, God has the capability of bringing anybody to him that he wants without the natural disasters. He has that capability?
If he chooses to.
Okay. So if he has the ability to do it without the natural disasters, but he chooses to do it with the natural disasters, then that means the natural disaster isn't actually necessary. It's just a decision that he made.
No, it is necessary for that. It's necessary because he deems it necessary, sir.
But
I know you think I'm walking in circles, but neither of us is God, and I can only give you my perspective, and one day, once we all get there and we all see him face to face, we'll know for a fact.
What does necessary mean?
Necessary to his plan, to how he's going to do things. If it's necessary for that hurricane to come through.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Necessary means that it can't be any other way.
Exactly.
Okay, but you just said it could be another way. He could accomplish his goals without the natural disasters, which means there is another way.
Okay, so if the necessary way of doing things in his will requires the natural disaster, then it will happen.
Right, but
if the necessary things don't require it, then that's how he'll do it.
But if it's necessary, meaning God couldn't do it any other way, then that means God's not all powerful.
I see it a complete opposite, sir. Honestly, you've made my point, and I don't know if you realize that you've made my point, but everything that you've just said, it the way I'm perceiving it, sir, is you're saying, well, there's no other way of doing it, so it makes him all bad and he can't be all powerful.
That's not what I said.
But if there's no other necessary way of doing it, then why would he?
That's the opposite of what I said. I said there's another way of doing it, and we know there's another way of doing it because he's all powerful. So if there is another way of doing it, and he chooses to do it with the suffering, then he's causing unnecessary suffering because he could have done it another way.
No, sir.
So then he's not all powerful.
No, sir.
If God is incapable of doing it another way, then that means there's something he's incapable of, which means he's not all powerful.
But we have already stated that he is capable of doing it another way.
Oh, that means it's unnecessary then.
No, sir.
All right. Well, listen, Jacob, it's getting late. I've got to get offline and get to bed. But please come back
Yes,
and
sir.
talk to me again soon. Listen, even if we don't agree, you're delightful.
Oh, well, I sure do appreciate you, sir. I didn't catch your name.
I'm Justin.
Justin, well, it was a pleasure to meet you, sir. And I look forward to speaking to y'all again. And, any questions you have, you're more than welcome to, ask me. I don't know how you want to do all that or whatnot, but I'd absolutely love to speak to you again. And, hopefully open your eyes up a little bit more, too.
Well, you can definitely give it your best shot, okay?
Hey, I sure do appreciate you, sir. I enjoyed the time.
Cheers. I had a great time, too. Have a great one, okay?
You too.
All right. I'll disconnect him here. Listen, he was delightful. Was he not, Sarah?
I can't.
Oh, boy.
That was like 1 + 3 is 4. No, 1 + 3 is 7. Like,
I know. I'm gonna try to add an audio source into Streamlabs, and I'm gonna see if we can pick up your voice for the next guest on Streamlabs. See if we can make that happen.
Okay.
But give me a second to see if we can make this work. Dun, dun, dun. All right, I think I've got a microphone added now, although it's picking up me and some additional stuff. Let me pause that for a second. Okay. I don't know. I'll work on this later. I might have a private session, over the weekend with somebody, and we see if we can work it out. It's weird that you can hear them, but they can't hear you.
That's strange.
I know. And so, do me a favor and say something. I want to see if the audio registers on Streamlabs.
Okie dokie. Am I working?
Yeah, it does. It registers on Streamlabs, which is why everyone can hear you over there on YouTube. It's just not getting to the guests. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to create a virtual microphone that will take all of the TikTok sound, including my microphone, or at least, maybe all of my desktop audio. And I'll make that the microphone for the Streamlabs guests. Because I can actually, when I go into Streamlabs and there's a guest waiting for me, I can actually tell it in the settings what microphone I want to send him, right? And so, for example, I can also do an audio input capture and see if that works. Actually, we got somebody in the guest box right now. Let me pull him in and see if it works.
Okay.
We've got Jesus in the guest box. Oh, they ran. Oh, I think they were here by accident. Okay, well, we'll try again some other time. We'll finagle with these settings and we'll get it working so that we don't have any more. We can have some back and forth, because I want Sarah to be able to engage with the YouTube guests. You know what I mean? Although, to be fair, Sarah, if somebody is on the YouTube stream, you can join on the YouTube stream as well. I know. It's a lot. It's a lot. I know.
I need the other. Do I need the other monitor for that?
No. Don't worry. Well, I'll show you how. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right. Listen, guys, thank you so much for being here tonight. It was kind of an impromptu session. I was trying to test a few things out. Make sure you're dropping Sarah a follow. Make sure you're following both of our YouTubes if you're on TikTok, and if you're on YouTube, make sure you're following our TikToks. Although, I mean, TikTok might be gone soon. January's rolling around. So thank you for all the chats, the super chats, and the gifts, and the likes, and the shares. And I know we're still in TikTok jail, and we're not getting any guests, but we're gonna keep doing what we can. So who's live right now that we can raid?
I don't know who's live right now.
Let me check real quick to see who's live. Chat, who's live right now? Cyber Deconstruction's live?
Where do you think you're going?
Oh, hold on.
Quit! I don't want to play anymore! Since when?
Dumb commercials. All right, I'm going to put Cyber Deconstruction on the screen so everyone can go find them. And we're going to go raid Cyber Deconstruction. Let's see. Where is Cyber? Cyber.deconstruction, I think is his name. There he is. And
if you actually read the Blue Letter Bible, it actually has a...
We got him, guys. We got him. Here's Cyber Deconstruction. If you're on YouTube and you have a TikTok account, just go drop in on Cyber Deconstruction, guys. Here's his name right here, Cyber Deconstruction. He's live right now. He's debating the same way we're debating. So let's all go drop in, tell him we sent you, and I'll meet you over there in just a couple minutes. But until then, I'll see you tomorrow night, guys.